Okay, who needed review sheets? And what review sheets did you need?
For next week.
Okay, you need both of them for next week?
Yes.
Alright. Does anybody else need any to get caught up?
5.
You need 5?
The one from Monday. I think it's 5. I think 4. Well, I have 4.
Oh.
Yes.
Did you get 6? Yes. 5 and 6. Yes.
There's 5 and
Okay,
6.
here's 5.
Okay, and 6. She just told me.
Okay, 6 is today.
Oh, okay. Never
So we'll
mind.
get that one today.
I need 3, 4, and 5.
So there's 3. I'm probably gonna have to print off another 5. Oh, there's okay, here's 3, 4, and 5. And I'll get you 7 and 8. Okay, here's 7 and 8.
Oh, you just want like them?
Okay, and this is the final review that I hand out on the last day. Let me go ahead and print for 6. Hello. We'll get started in just a minute, guys. Just gotta take care of a few housekeeping issues here. Morning. Sure, absolutely. You can at any time. It's adult education, so whenever you have to leave, but we'll have practice time today, so you can certainly leave during practice time, and that way you don't miss much.
All right, thank you.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. How is everybody today?
Good.
Yeah, weather out there is not good. Okay, so since last class, you have chapter 7 to read and do the homework. Anybody have any questions about the test for chapter 7? Any questions? Anything you missed and not know why you missed it? It's on page 138.
Thank you.
Yeah, 138. In your white book, 138 in your white book. Do you find these chapter tests helpful at all?
Yes.
To kind of summarize the reading? Is it good? Okay. All right, so let me get your scores for chapter 7, which is on page 138 of your white book. Mariah, Karina,
100.
Zion, Janice B. Thank you. Jennifer,
95.
can I get 5 and 6 as well?
They're both 100.
Thank you. Raylan? Jashanti? Alana? Alana, do you happen to have 4 for me as well?
No, I'm doing that tonight.
No worries. Desiree?
100.
Allison?
100.
Kristen?
100.
Keely? Delilah? Rebecca?
I still have to catch up from the previous week.
Okay, all right. I'm missing from, just so that you know, I'm
Yeah.
missing 2 and on. So, whenever you get caught up,
Right.
and I'll ask you again next week, just
Sure.
because I have blanks, so
Okay.
that tells me to ask. All right. So over the weekend, you guys are going to have chapters 8 and 9 for homework. 8 is on nutrition. Pay attention to chapter 8. You will have a few questions on the state exam about nutrition, because we truly are what we eat. And what we eat is going to affect the health conditions that your patients have. We talked a little bit about salt. Do you guys remember talking about popcorn at the movie theater and how salt doesn't really excrete from the body very well other than through sweat? So we have to push water into the vascular system to dilute it, which raises our blood pressure, right? So if our patient already has high blood pressure, what kind of diet do you think they're going to be on?
No salt.
A low salt diet, that's right. And if we don't pay really close attention to that, and we pass him a tray that has pretzels and canned green beans and, all this stuff that has a lot of sodium in it, that can affect his blood pressure later that day and set him up for some pretty bad situations. Does that make sense? So chapter 8 talks about some different diets, things like low sodium, diabetic diet. It also talks about thickened liquids. When somebody has trouble swallowing, a lot of times we get an order to thicken their liquids. And there's 3 main consistencies, and you need to know those. Okay. So there's nectar thick, which is just a little thick. There's honey thick, which is thicker. And then there's pudding thick, which, you can turn the spoon upside down,
that's very good.
So we have to know, if we're going to thicken the liquids, we have to know how thick do we go, right? Because that's something that we actually do at the bedside. You sometimes, depending on your patient, it's just a powder that we add in the liquids and stir up. But we need to know how thick do we need to make it, okay? So pay attention to the diets, pay attention to the actions that we're going to take, and understand how important it is that the right patients get the right diets so that we can prevent complications, okay? Chapter 9 is on rehabilitation. It's good to know. Some of you may end up in a rehabilitation center. And the focus for rehabilitation is to restore the patient to the highest possible level of function. So we end up with a lot of different toys to play with rehabilitation. We have walkers and canes and lifts and adaptive equipment, prosthetics, orthotics. So we got a lot of different items that we can use to help our patients achieve the highest level of independence possible. So chapter 9 is going to go over those. Don't worry about memorizing all of the different adaptive equipment because that would make you an occupational therapist and we're not going there. Okay. But passing familiarity is what we're looking for.
Will that be on the test?
All of the different types of adaptive equipment are not going to be on the test, but you do need to know to follow the care plan, right? We don't get to decide that a patient needs a walker today, not our call. So we're going to follow the care plan. And any adaptive equipment that you're going to be using, you need to be trained on for that specific patient because adaptive really is patient specific. So you have to be trained on that equipment for that patient. Okay. Good. That's really what you would need to know. All right. Let's go here. Wow. You guys are down to the wire. 1 week of class left. So, good morning, Marsha. Yep, 1 week of class left. So the question is, we only have 1 week of class left. Did you register for the state exam? How many of you guys have registered? Okay. You're going to want to make that a priority. And here's the problem. Right now, you don't feel confident enough to register for that test. I know you don't. I've been teaching this class a long time. And you're going, okay, well, I'm just going to wait and practice a little bit, and then I'll send in my application. Don't do that. Send your application in. And the reason I don't want you to wait until you're comfortable is you're never going to feel comfortable. And the further away from class you get, the less comfortable you're going to be. That's just reality. I have a lot of people that take my class, they listen to this lecture, they don't register for the test, and then 9 months, a year later, they're back in my classroom because after graduation, they didn't practice, life got in the way, they put it off, and then they realize that it's been too long, I don't remember anything, and they just put their dreams on hold, go through life, and then something happens, and now all of a sudden they need that certification. They need to get out there and start working, and they've got to start from scratch again. You don't want to do that to yourselves. Jump in. You guys are ready. You don't think you are, but trust me, I've been doing this a long time. You're ready. And by registering for the test, that's going to give you a little push that you may need to practice because there's no backing out now. Okay, good. Is that me? Okay. All right. Thank you, Caitlin. All right, so I want to talk to you about this. This is something I just started doing a couple of months ago. It's actually really fun. Our game show, it would actually normally have been yesterday, but I canceled it for this session just because I am crazy busy with this book right now. I mean, it's taking up all of my time and attention. I was working on it early this morning. I've got to get it done. I've got pre-orders coming in from schools and I'm not ready yet. So I'm a little stressed, so I canceled it for yesterday. But on the 1st and 3rd Tuesday of every month, so this will be, I think, September 3rd will be the next one. I do a live game show, and this is an actual game show format that we do on YouTube. And I put a written test question up there, something that is similar to what you would get on the state exam with 4 options, just like the state exam. And you type into the chat the answer that you think is appropriate. And I have a program that actually reads those chats, awards points, and puts you on a leaderboard. And the first, second, and third place winners on the game show get prizes, like real prizes, like the CNA card game. This is all the principles. Everything that we've learned on the back wall, I made it into a card game, and it's super fun. It's rummy style, so you're collecting the sets, but you have to avoid the crappy caregivers because they're going to pull you down. There's HIPAA violations that have a penalty. There's call-off crises. There's call-out catastrophes. There's fire drills. All kinds. And if you handle a fire drill properly, you can actually win the game. So a lot of really fun ways of practicing, and you don't need to be a student or be a CNA to play it, because anybody in your family can play with numbers. So it's got numbers on it, so they just collect the numbers. Make sense? So I give this away every single game show. First place gets this one. And a badge holder.
I have that. It is fun.
It is fun, yeah. I also give away some other things. So if you're looking to brush up for the state exam, the game show is a really fun way of getting some practice questions in. And of course, we have the replays of the past episodes up for review. So if you go through all of those, it's over, I probably about 150, 200 questions that I already have out there that you can use for review. And for the answers, I actually go through and explain the answers thoroughly. Why the right answer is the right answer and why the wrong answers are wrong. So it's a really good learning opportunity. So you have that available to you.
I like when you did that in the ebook. That was like very good.
Oh, you saw the ebook too. So yeah, for those of you who haven't seen the ebook, I'm having some problems with my website. Bear with me. I've contacted a web developer, and they're going through it all to fix everything, because right now my ebook isn't working. The personality quiz isn't working. I'm having some issues. So the web developer, but unfortunately she just had a baby. I mean, just had a baby. So it's going to take her a little bit of time to get in there and fix all the things that need to be fixed. So bear with me. But yeah, that ebook definitely helps with the written exam. So we got a lot of resources for you. And that's what I'm saying. If you don't think you're ready, register for the test, because I'm not done with you yet. And once you get through all of my resources, you will be ready. Between the ebook and the practice test, and we have a practice test in the book I'll tell you about next week, plus all of the videos and the online course. Remember, you guys had access to that online course to help you really dial in those skills as well. That is not the right slide. Okay. Well, hold on. Where is my care plan? Okay, well, we're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way then. Our first skill today is transfer from bed to wheelchair. So let's go to page 50 in your skills book. Page 50. Thank you, Caitlin. I don't know how I missed that one. Not sure. All right, I don't have this to put up on the screen, so this will be my next project once I get the book done. I'm not gonna sleep for the next 3 months. All right, so I don't have it up on the screen, but at the top of page 50, you can see the care plan. So for those of you at home, this is what it looks like. You should have your book if you're following along at home. Our care plan tells us to transfer the resident from bed to the wheelchair. The resident is unable to walk or take steps. You want to underline that, highlight it, circle it, do something. They are unable to walk or take steps. Super important. That is a graded checkpoint, and that's going to determine how we do this skill. And if you miss that part, it can cause you to fail the skill. Okay, so patient is unable to walk or take steps, but they can stand for support. Okay, so can't take steps, but can stand. Kind of like me. You know how my knee is acting up, right? I can stand up, but man, taking a step, that kind of hurts. So this could be pretty much anybody, right? They can stand up, they just can't take steps. So we have to complete this task as a pivot without them taking steps. If you don't have the wheelchair close enough to the bed, when you stand the patient up and you pivot them, they're not going to be near the wheelchair, and they're going to unconsciously have to take a step back. What does our care plan say?
No
They
steps.
can't. So we've got to make sure that we understand this care plan, and we set the skill up so that the patient doesn't have to take any steps. All right, so the gait belt or transfer belt is required to transfer the resident. Do you guys remember ambulate with a gait belt?
I don't remember.
This is very, 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 very similar to ambulate with a gait belt. We're going to use the gait belt the same way. Remember, it goes on over the clothing, around the waist. We buckle the gait belt in front, tuck the tail so it's not in our way. We're going to use the same body mechanics. 1 foot in front, 1 foot beside. Remember at the corner of the box? You guys remember that for body mechanics? We're going to grab the gait belt at the same place around the sides or back. We're going to lift the patient the same way, their hands on our shoulders, and we count to 3. All of that's the same. Exact same steps. What's different is that once we lifted the patient for ambulate, we let them stand for a couple seconds to acclimate, asked if they were dizzy, and then we went for a walk. This says our patient can't walk. So when we stand our patient up, we're going to pivot them, and we're going to help them sit in the wheelchair. But if you remember with ambulate, when I helped the patient sit in the chair, I backed them up and asked them, can you feel the chair behind you? You guys remember that?
Mhm.
That was super important. We're going to do the same thing with wheelchair. When we pivot the patient around, we need to make sure they can feel that chair behind them, and then we're going to help them sit. So very similar to ambulate. A lot of the same steps. What makes this one a little bit different is our patient is going to start out in a bed. Remember with ambulate, they were already sitting in a chair. This time, they're going to start out in the bed. And we're going to pivot them around so that we get them in a sitting position. We're going to put their shoes on because remember, if their feet touch floor, we got to talk about their shoes, right? And then we'll make sure those feet are flat on the floor, just like with ambulate. Put the gait belt on, pick the patient up, pivot them, make sure they can feel the wheelchair, sit them down, take the gait belt off. So a little bit different in that our patient starts out in bed. We got a couple more steps to do because we got to set them up and get their shoes on. But a lot of the principles are the same. What we really need to understand for this skill, however, is the wheelchair. So when it comes to wheelchair safety, brakes, and more brakes are what we're going to focus on. So let me get my wheelchair here. Need a wheelchair license. Okay, wheelchairs are usually in the folded position for storage, keeps them smaller. In order to open a wheelchair up for a patient to use, there's no buttons to push or levers to pull or anything like that. You simply pull it apart. But if you notice when I did that, I lifted the big wheels off the floor just a little bit. Because if you don't, if you leave the big wheels on the floor, it's friction. You're fighting friction. So it makes it a little bit harder to open. If you lift it up just a little bit, get those back wheels off the floor, they usually will open pretty good. Not all wheelchairs open this easy though. Some of them are a little bit harder. And when you open it, they're only going to open up about that far. And you have to open it the rest of the way manually by pressing down on these sidebars. Okay, so if I put my hands on the sidebars and push outward, it'll open the rest of the way. But I want to keep my fingers out of the way. If I put my fingers down like this, as I open that wheelchair, my fingers are going to get pinched. So when I press down on the seat, I want to keep my fingers up out of the way. Make sense? Good? Okay. So brakes are important. And the way that we remember brakes for wheelchairs is if the wheelchair is not actively moving, the brakes should be on. It should be locked. That's because floors, especially in Florida, are rarely completely level. We use a lot of concrete in Florida for our floors, and we build on sand, which shifts. That causes the concrete to crack. Well, when the concrete cracked, when you had a level floor, now it's a little not level, right? When we put a patient in a wheelchair on an unlevel floor and they start to roll, the weight of the patient is going to cause them to pick up momentum. And the only thing that's going to stop them is whatever they run into, which could be a wall, piece of equipment, another patient, right? So if the patient is in a wheelchair, the wheelchair should be locked. But even for storage, it should be locked. Basically, if it's not actively going somewhere, it should be locked. Okay? In order to lock the wheelchairs, if you look here, this is the locking assembly right here. Bless you. You'll see a little metal bar there. Right now it's in the unlocked position. You can see there's a gap between the middle bar and the tire, the wheel. So that's unlocked. If we press that lever backwards on this wheelchair, it engages that metal and it presses into the wheel, and now we're locked. Now, every wheelchair works a little bit differently. Some wheelchairs, we push the brakes, the controller, this thing, forward. Other wheelchairs, we pull it backwards. You just need to know how to engage the brakes in the wheelchair you're working with, right? They either go forward or backward. Try it out. Figure out which one we're working with. Good? Good? All right. Let's talk about the seat height differences and why it's important. So I'll give you a real live demonstration. So if you look at the height of each of these seats, you'll see there's a difference, right? So exactly what you see there. This chair is lower. And that's because when we're sitting in a chair, we don't want our feet to dangle. We want our feet flat on the floor. That supports our legs and reduces fatigue and all that kind of stuff. Me, I'm short. So even though the chair is shorter, I still can't hit the floor, right? I'm up on my tiptoes. But the theory is, right, that we want our feet flat on the floor. Well, the whole point of a wheelchair is mobility. Right? If we aren't moving the patient, they can just go in a regular chair. The whole point of a wheelchair is to be able to take them somewhere. If I am moving this patient, I don't want their feet flat on the floor because I'm trying to move them. Well, because the chair is higher, so the feet don't rest on the floor. Because that wheelchair is higher, that means the legs are going to dangle. Now, in our body, right, we have two systems. We have a system that takes blood to your cells, and then after that blood has been used up, we have a system that's connected that takes blood from your cells, right? So we have an artery system that takes blood to the cells. We have a vein system that brings blood back. Good? Two systems connected in the middle, but they're two systems. Well, your veins for your legs, we don't need any help to get the blood down to our feet. We got gravity for that, right? So the arteries don't have to work real hard. We just, on Earth, blood just kind of falls down. Cool. But to get that blood back up, well, now we need some help because that blood's got to climb up. And the veins in your legs actually have little valves inside, like little ladders. So as the heart pumps, it moves the blood from section to section. Pretty cool. But the veins in your legs actually kind of the closest to the surface are behind your knees. Okay, so all of our veins from our feet and our lower legs kind of converge, kind of like an interchange on a highway system behind your knees. Well, if we're sitting in a wheelchair and our legs are dangling, that area at the back of the knees is right here pressing into that seat. And that's exactly what happens is that seat actually presses up into those veins and crimps them off. And blood can't get back up to the heart very well. So when we have a patient in a wheelchair and their legs are dangling, it can cause swelling because that blood can't get back to the heart very well. Now, I don't know if you remember last week, we learned that if blood slows or stops, it tends to clot. You guys remember hearing that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we're slowing down blood, what is the risk here? Blood clots. So when we have a patient sitting in a wheelchair and their legs are dangling, that's not good for our patient. So we have to have something to support those feet. A lot of CNAs will skip this step. They take those leg rests off because they just don't want to deal with them. They're in the way. And that's not good for our patient. Dangling legs are never good for the patient, so don't do that. Leg rests serve a purpose. We need to keep them on our wheelchair. Good?
Mm-hmm.
So when I get a patient into the wheelchair, I need to position their feet directly on these foot pedals to support them, but it still gives me that mobility that I need for the wheelchair. Okay? Now the problem is, where am I? The problem is that the footrests and the leg pedals that you see here are in my way. I can't get a patient into the wheelchair. I can't get a patient out of the wheelchair because these things are in the way. So if I want to actually load or unload this wheelchair, I have to swing those leg rests and foot pedals out of the way. So to do that, foot pedals just fold up, just like that. Leg rests swing out of the way, but right now they're locked. They aren't swinging anywhere. There's a little catch back here that connects the leg to the wheelchair itself, this little catch. If you pull the catch forward, those leg rests just simply swing out of the way. And now I've got my wheelchair wide open for loading or unloading. I need to make sure the wheelchair is locked so it doesn't move on me. But you want to also make sure those leg rests and foot pedals are out of the way. So there's 3 basic positions that you'll see leg rests in. So the forward position is when the wheelchair is in use. The foot pedals up, but the leg rests forward, like when I brought this over, that's during storage. And then, excuse me. And then the leg rests folded out and the foot pedals up, which is what you see here, is for loading and unloading. Okay, good. Questions? All right, let's talk about positioning. If you remember, I had you highlight that the patient cannot take steps. So that's what this is all about. So if we're going to transfer this patient out of bed and into the wheelchair, which is what you see here, I need to bring the wheelchair close to the bed, and that front wheel should almost be touching the bed. I mean, you should be able to fit basically a piece of paper there. Not much else. If we do that, if we get it properly positioned, and we want to kind of make it at a slight angle to make it a little bit easier, If we get that wheelchair super close to the bed, when I stand this person up, all I have to do is pivot them and the wheelchair is right there. That's how we avoid taking steps. Where people get into trouble here is they get the wheelchair further out, and then when they pick the patient up and pivot them, the wheelchair is not there. And people will unconsciously take a step. But our care plan is very clear. They can't. So the wheelchair position is probably the most important step, other than breaks, for this skill. So I told you that we have to make sure the patient can feel the chair behind them. That's a whole lot of time, right? If I pick a patient up and pivot them, and I have to stop and ask, do you feel that wheelchair behind you? And they have to think about it and then answer. That's a lot of time for me to be holding that weight up. So instead, we know they have to feel the chair before we sit them down. But instead of picking them up and then asking them, I actually ask them before I pick them up. And what I say is, I'm going to lift you to a standing position and pivot you. When you feel that wheelchair behind your legs, I want you to say, sit. And then right before, I'll have them put their hands on my shoulders. I'll grab the gate belt and I'll say, remember, say sit when you feel that wheelchair. Up, over, sit, down. Okay, it shortens the amount of time you're supporting that patient's weight. Good? Is that me?
I think my watch just died on somebody. My watch was talking. That's why I was
Mine
trying to
does
shut
too
it.
occasionally, yeah.
I was trying to shut it up.
Yeah, mine does too occasionally. All right, so here's our shoe rules that are going to govern this particular skill. Do you find it a little bit easier to learn the skills using these principles?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so of course, if patients' feet hit the floor, we're going to talk about the shoes. We know that. Slipper socks are not enough. And remember, your patient's going to be laying in bed with socks on. Is that enough? Can we transfer them? So this is a graded checkpoint. When we put the gait belt on, how do we check it? 4 fingers. And we need to make sure the patient's feet are flat on the floor. That way, when we lift them up, they're not on their tippy toes. We're going to count to 3 before lifting so that they can cooperate as much as they can. And we want to make sure that they're not dizzy when we stand them up. Now, when we're transferring into a wheelchair, it's kind of hard to do this one because we really want to get them seated pretty quickly. But we do want to pay attention. We don't have to ask if they're dizzy, but we do want to pay attention. If we lift a patient up, because this is kind of quick, right? If our patient is weak or nauseous, this could be bad news. So when we lift that patient up, we kind of want to pay attention. Do they start breathing quicker? Do they grab onto your shoulders really tight? Do they get pale and sweaty all of a sudden? What's going on with the patient? So kind of pay attention to that and then pivot them around. We're not going to ask if they are dizzy, but we do want to pay attention to it. Okay? Because if they're dizzy, once we get them into the wheelchair, they might slide out or they might pass out. So if we lift somebody up and they get all wonky on us, we're going to sit them back down and get them back into bed and go find a nurse because that's above our pay grade. Patient must feel the chair. We went over that. And we're going to use those same proper body mechanics. 1 foot in front of the feet, 1 foot parallel to the body when we lift the patient. Now, there's not a whole lot of room here because remember that wheelchair has to be super close to the bed. Your patient's feet are right there. Not a lot of room to work with. But you've got to have it positioned like that to get it done. And I'll show you how to do that. All right. So here are the skill-specific steps. These are the things that you're being graded on related to wheelchair. So we have to bring that wheelchair near the bed. And it's got to pretty much touch the bed. Maybe a piece of paper, no more. We want to get those foot pedals out of the way and pivot that patient to sit on the side of the bed and dangle while we get their shoes on and make sure their feet are flat on the floor. We're going to put a wheelchair at an angle close to the bed and lock it. Make sure the patient has a gait belt on. We're going to brace the patient's feet with our foot going across. We're going to pivot the patient into the wheelchair without them taking steps and lower them into the seat. And then at the end, we're going to get those feet on the foot pedals and make sure the wheelchair is locked. The end of this care plan tells us the resident will stay in the room. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's say that I pivot this patient into the wheelchair. What is that wheelchair facing? The wall. How many of you guys are okay just facing a wall for an unknown amount of time with no entertainment? In school, we used to call that a punishment, right? Put you in the corner. That's what this feels like for the patient. Is this an appropriate position to leave our patient? So when we get a patient into the wheelchair and we're going to put those foot pedals out, the leg rests out, the foot pedals down, we're going to turn that wheelchair so that we can reach those leg rests and foot pedals and lock it in place, but the patient needs to be facing away from the wall. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Do you understand why? That's a patient rights issue. Actually, kind of important. All right. So, let's do this. Give me just a second. I'm going to get this all set up. And I will need a volunteer, so you guys can start fighting over that now.
Oh, he's still dressed for Monday. Looking good.
Yeah, when you guys are in here practicing, always make sure the patient is in a gown before you leave. Because every skill starts with a patient. Go ahead and lay down. Every skill starts with a patient in a gown. All right, so for this skill, our wheelchair is going to be in the area for the test. It won't be next to the bed, but it'll be in the area. It may be in the closed position. That's possible. You may have to open it at the beginning of the skill. But most of the time, it's already open and just kind of hanging out in the patient area, just not near the bed. Okay? So, that's going to hurt. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I need you to take your shoes off and just get them right beside the bed for me. So for the test, this brings up a good point, and I should have delegated here. For the test, for this skill, if you get this skill, the evaluator is going to pair you up with somebody your body size or smaller, and they're going to try to find somebody that fits that criteria that has slip-on shoes. So you would actually be a good candidate for this. They're trying to make this a little bit easier for you on the test rather than trying to struggle with shoes and tie them and all of those types of things. All right, so I'm going to start this skill. I will simulate hand washing for the sake of time, just because I want to get through our skills today so that you've got enough time to practice, okay? So I will simulate hand washing. Hi, Ms. Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. How are you?
Good.
Fantastic. Do you feel like getting up and into the wheelchair? Yeah. All right, I'm going to close your curtain. Let me go wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. Okay. I have clean hands. Whoops. Let me get go. Where's my book?
Right here.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'm just gonna set the gate belt in the wheelchair for right now. I'm gonna bring the wheelchair a little bit close, just within reach. Remember, I gotta pivot her around the side of the bed. If I bring the wheelchair close now, her feet are gonna hit it when I pivot her. So I just want it in reach. Okay. Feeling all right? I'm just gonna uncover you here. And I'm going to pivot you around so you're sitting on the side of the bed. And I'm gonna do all the work, okay? I need you to scoot your whole body toward me. Cross your arms and relax. Now, in order to pivot her, I'm going to take this arm and go underneath her shoulders as far over as I can. I really want her furthest shoulder in this palm. This arm is the one everybody gets mixed up. It doesn't go under the legs. We're not doing a honeymoon carry. It goes over the legs. When you take this arm under and this one over, it's just a smooth pivot. Okay? But your patient needs to be a little bit relaxed. I need a wide base of support here, and I'm going to lean against the bed for torque. Make sure your bed is low
And low.
and low. Okay? So I'm going to lean against the bed for support. I'm going to place this arm underneath your shoulders. And this one over the knees. On the count of three, we're going to turn. 1, 2, 3. Okay, good. Now that's kind of a quick turn. So your patient might get a little off balance, a little dizzy. So take a minute. Good?
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead and straighten up. There we go. And I'm going to help you with your shoes. Or you might help me with your shoes.
Yeah.
Go ahead and put them in there. Go ahead. And then I can tie it. Oh, unsteady. Okay, are your feet flat on the floor?
Yes.
Bless you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna put this gate belt around your waist. This is gonna help me lift you up and put you in the wheelchair, okay? So we put the gate belt on. We wanna make sure it's not twisted. Tag is on the inside. We're gonna put it by the first guard, by the alligator teeth. And we wanna make sure it's snug. We'll test it with 4 fingers. And then lock it into place. Now I'm gonna get that wheelchair close. And when I say close, I mean close. See how close we are? Then I'm going to lock that wheelchair in place. All right, Miss Jones, I'm going to help you into the wheelchair. You're going to put your hands on my shoulders. On the count of 3, we're going to stand and turn. When you feel that chair behind you, you can feel it behind your legs, I want you to say sit. Okay? So I'm going to put 1 foot in front, 1 foot beside. Put your hands up here. On the count of 3, we're going to lift and stand. When you feel that wheelchair, say sit. 1, 2, 3.
Sit.
Okay. Now we'll remove that gate belt.
You made it look so easy.
Go ahead and lift your arms up, please. Experience.
Yeah.
All right. So now I've got to get her feet on those foot pedals. So I'm going to unlock the wheelchair. Lift your feet up for me. And I'm going to turn you around. So I'm going to lock the wheel. Bring the leg rest forward. Put the foot pedal down and support her foot. Over here, I'm going to lock the wheelchair. Swing the leg rest forward. Lift her foot up. And put the foot on the foot pedal. Good? Are you comfortable?
Yeah.
I have to find your call light. Okay. Here's your call light. If you need anything, okay. There you go. That's as far as it goes. If you need anything at all, just hit that red button. I'll be happy to help. Is there anything else I can get for you on here?
No.
Would you like a magazine before I go?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Somebody will be down to take you to breakfast in just a few minutes.
Awesome.
Here, there's blueberry pancakes.
My favorite.
Okay, I'm going to open the curtain. Put my gate belt back. look around, make sure I don't need to make any corrections or anything. I probably would pull the sheet up just because I like environments that are nice and neat. This to me is messy, but it's not a requirement for the skill. Once I'm happy with my skill, I'll wash my hands, make any corrections, and then tell the evaluator my skill is done. Good, thank you. Be careful. Okay, I'm gonna leave the wheelchair right out here for you guys to be able to practice with on practice time. All right. Any questions?
Oh, I got a question. Okay, so when getting the patient out of the bed, and can you like simulate and say, "Let's go dancing"?
You can, but I don't want you to do that for the test.
Okay.
And yes, I use a lot of humor with my patients because humor is it's a way of connecting with others. So I use a lot of humor too. But for the test, I don't want to complicate the issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, just be very clear in telling them what you're going to be doing. Good question. All right. All right, let's go to page 75 in your skills book. Page 75. All right, this care plan at the top of the page tells us to feed the resident a snack who is unable to feed him or herself. So what are we feeding him? Not a meal, a snack. For the test, if you look at the bottom of the page, you'll see a testing student is your patient. So one of you guys might actually be eating something for the test. For the test, it's a single serve pudding or applesauce cup. That's what we use. Just single serve. But you're also, as the patient, going to get very specific instructions. The first thing they're going to do is have you sit down at the overbed table and slump or slouch. Okay? The reason for that, it tells us to feed a resident a snack who is unable to feed him or herself. The resident is sitting in a chair in an inappropriate position for eating. Now, this is the only care plan in existence that's going to tell you your patient is in an inappropriate position for eating. Your normal care plans are not going to say that. The reason is because you may not think that that is slouching, right? Every teenager in the world that eats dinner at the dining room table eats like that, right? That is, in our minds, maybe not slouching, but what does our care plan say? Inappropriate. So that means that we're going to have to get them to sit up straight. That's why our care plan tells us that they're not relying on our judgment. Good? Make sense? So that is a critical checkpoint, getting that patient to sit up straight because our care plan is drawing it to our attention. We're going to document the intake on a food fluid intake form, which you can see a sample of there in the middle of the page. You can also see a bigger version on page 120 and 121. These are all your documentation sheets. 120 and 121. So you've got full-size documentation sheets to play with. Okay, this book is full of all kinds of hidden gems. All right. So any questions on our care plan? It's pretty easy, right? We're just feeding another human a snack. We're going to make them sit up straight first. It's a little bit more complex than that, just a little bit. When you are the patient for this, you're going to get specific instructions to stop eating after 4 bites. That's all they want you to take is 4 bites. So no matter how hungry you are, don't eat anymore. Now, After the fourth bite, you're going to tell the CNA, I'm done, I'm finished, I'm full, I don't want any more. However you want to do it, but you're going to stop eating at 4 bites. Now, what the student is being graded on is how they handle that. So do they go, oh, thank God, I've got a million things to do and you're holding me up? Or do they encourage the patient? And I want you to use 2 forms of encouragement. I'm going to give you 3, but you need to use 2. So I always ask my patient, you can always get further with patients by being nice, always. So I ask my patient, are you sure you don't want just one more bite? Just one more? Because a lot of times they're not eating because they think you have better things to do. So don't give them that impression. Make them feel like you want to be there feeding them. So are you sure you don't want just one more bite? Is a good way to do that. I also let them know that there's food available later if they get hungry. We have a nutrition center, a snack center, so we can get something for them. It's not a now or never type of thing. But I also, when I'm encouraging patients, I usually ask if they've only taken a few bites or they've only eaten a little bit. Sometimes I'll ask, can I get you something else from the kitchen? Now, we've all had these days. We think we want something, we go make it, we take a bite, and we're like, nope, not it. Not what I was looking for. I did that with macaroni and cheese the other day. I asked my husband what he wanted for lunch, and I made little smokies wrapped with croissants. Have you ever done those? Those are really good. And mac and cheese. And the mac and cheese sounded good, but I took a bite, and I'm like, no, that's not really what I wanted. Right? We've all had those days. Well, maybe if your patient is only taking a few bites, maybe they're having one of those days. And if we can find something else to feed them that might be a little bit better, more along the lines of what they're looking for, your patient might eat a little bit better. Do you guys remember talking about energy conservation last class? Remember we talked about how our energy levels decline, right? Well, if we have a patient who's already fighting an illness or an injury, so their energy is going toward healing. They've only got this much energy. A lot of it's going toward healing. If they only take a couple of bites, they're not getting a whole lot of nutrition in. So what do you think is going to happen to their energy levels tomorrow? They're going to be even lower. And this can start the patient on a downward spiral that's very, very hard to recover from. Because the less energy you have, the less likely you are to eat. The less you eat, the less energy you have, the less likely you are to eat. And it becomes this whole spiral. Make sense? So the more accommodating we can be, the more encouraging we can be, and get them something else if this isn't doing it for them, we can maybe keep those energy levels up so the patient doesn't have complications. Does that make sense? Everybody got that? All right, so that's really the big things with this one. Is your patient is not going to be sitting upright, get them sitting upright. You want to feed them 4 bites. Now, the spoon should only be about half full. Don't overload your spoon. Don't try to get in as much as you can on it every round, right? Lop it up there and try to shove it in. You want to give them time to chew and swallow. Well, that makes sense. And we want to be accommodating as we do this. But there's a couple other rules. Feeding it doesn't follow a lot of our same rules. It's kind of a different type of skill. So some of the ways it's different is that we don't use a barrier on the table. Our food tray is our barrier. And it's the only time we're using the table for what it's actually supposed to be used for. So we don't use a barrier. We also don't close a privacy curtain. Now, this is because eating is a social event. People gather in groups to eat. Think of every major milestone in your life, right? Birthday parties, what's there? Food. Yeah, people, but food. Food is what brings the people, right? What about graduations? What's there? Food. Bridal showers. Weddings. Yeah, food and wine. Weddings. Baby showers. All kinds of stuff. Celebrations, retirements, even funerals. What's there? Food. Yeah, because we're trying to provide comfort for the people that are left. So food is central to every social activity that we do. And sometimes we don't even need an activity. We just do food, right? Have your neighbors over for a barbecue. Get together with your family. So food is social. Now, if we pull that curtain, we're isolating the patient. We're blocking them off from social. And that can be very detrimental to their appetite. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So let me give you a different way of looking at this. Let's say that you go across the street over to Cody's today after class, because it's buy one, get one fajitas. So who doesn't like that, right? So you all go over to Cody's, and there's about 70 people there, all sitting at tables, waiting on their food. And when you walk in, it's dead silent. How awkward would that be?
Very.
When you go into a restaurant, you expect a certain amount of noise, right? Because people are having conversations. No, you're not eating with your mouth full. You're chewing while somebody else is talking. And then when they take a bite, you start talking, right? You have conversations. Eating in silence, oh, that's no good. It's awkward. It's weird. And it makes the patient feel some kind of way. Does that make sense? Good. So for this skill, we have to have a conversation. Every other skill we do, we can just tell them what we're doing. I'm going to put your hand in the basin to soak. I'm going to take it out to wash. I'm going to put it back in to rinse. I'm going to take it out to dry. You can tell them the steps. That's fine. This skill, you cannot. You cannot say, I'm going to put food on the spoon. I'm going to bring it to your mouth. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I now look like a deranged idiot, right? This is not the skill that you want to recite your steps. You need to have a conversation. Now, for the test, it doesn't have to be real. Make something up. Nobody cares. They're showing a movie in the rec center on the big screen. Casablanca, do you want to go? They're playing bingo, and the jackpot's $2.10 today. Martha says she's going to win it. Did you see those little kids come in the lobby for the Easter egg hunt? Weren't they adorable? Oh, the one in the bunny ears. Make something up. I don't care, but you better be having a conversation. Do not feed your patient in silence for the test or in real life. Now, in a clinical setting, I like to look around because patients will display things that they're willing to talk about. Like, I don't take my deepest, darkest skeletons in the closet and put them on the wall, right? It's the reason they're in the closet. So if it's on the wall, it's something I'm willing to talk about. For instance, I got a picture up there on my bookshelf of a cruise that I took. I'm willing to talk about that. If somebody looked out there and said, hey, tell me about that cruise, oh, let's talk about it, right? So we display things that we're willing to have conversations about. Your patient does too. So if you look around their environment, you may see some pictures. I love this, especially with the older women. When you look around, most of them have a nice black and white photo of a woman that is dressed unbelievably. I mean, these women really put us to shame, right? They knew how to dress, makeup, hair. They didn't go to the mailbox unless they were looking on point, right? So this woman looks gorgeous. Yes, and she's usually next to a man in uniform, right? So I'll look at that picture and I'll go, wow, what a great couple. Did you know them? Were they movie stars or something? And she'll sit up straighter and she'll go, oh no, honey, that was me. Now I have just made her day. I have made her feel good. So what do you think it's going to do to her appetite?
She's going to eat.
Yeah, she's going to eat because she feels good. She feels good, right? But that gives me an opportunity. Wow, that's your husband. Where'd you meet him? How long were you married? Right? I can guarantee you I have no pictures of my ex-husband up on my wall. Right? This is not somebody that she's not willing to talk about. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So if it's on the wall, you can talk about it. Sometimes there'll be drawings, kids' drawings. Mm-hmm. Right? You can ask, who drew that? Oh, that's my great-granddaughter. Wow. How old is she? How many do you have? Where do they live? Gives me all kinds of conversation opportunities. Look around your environment. It's amazing, though, because sometimes your patients will surprise you. I met a man who was knighted by the Queen of England. He was an actual, honest to God knight. Sir. Isn't that amazing? How many people do you know that have been knighted by the Queen of England? I mean, that's a conversation. I met a man who was an engineer on the Apollo mission when we sent people to the moon. Yeah. Unfortunately, he had dementia. Let me tell you this story. This is pretty cool. So I'll tell you this story. So he had dementia, was in a locked unit, and the facility had an elevator. And when he got off the elevator, a lot of times there was a wheelchair in front of the elevator that had been taken apart. Yeah, weird, right? So this gentleman, we didn't know his history or anything. He had dementia, but he would take things apart. And like, we didn't know how he was taking stuff apart. He did not have a toolbox in his room, right? But he was actually stealing the knives from the dining room, putting them in his pocket, and taking stuff apart. And he, for some reason, left the wheelchair pieces in front of the elevator. I don't know why. Not sure what, it's dementia. You never know where those pathways are leading. But so his nephew came and visited him one day. And I finally said, what did he do for a living? And he says, oh, he was an engineer. I said, oh, that explains it. Because engineers like to take stuff apart. They're not always good at putting stuff back together, though, right? So I said, oh, well, that's neat. So what kind of engineering did he do? And he said, oh, he worked for NASA. Wow. He says, yeah, he was actually on the team that sent the people to the moon. Wow, that's amazing. So, yeah, I'm okay with him taking stuff apart now because he's trying to solve a problem in his head that he's stuck on. Okay, no problem. So I suggested to the nephew, I said, why don't you go get him one of those building sets, like a Connects set? And he would sit there and just put pieces together all day long and take pieces apart, and it just kept him very happy. So you never know what is motivating your patients, right? A lot of staff members are just exasperated with him because he's taking stuff apart and, it just very frustrated with him. I want to get to the bottom of the why. There's a reason he's taking stuff apart. Let's get to that. So interesting. But sometimes your patients will surprise you. I'll tell you a story about this one. It's one of the most interesting conversations I've ever had with a patient. Now, I was up in Citrus County. This is where I was a nurse before I moved here to Hernando. And I was going to do wound care on a patient, bless you, in an assisted living facility. She actually had her own apartment. And this was extensive wound care. This was like 40 minutes of taking the dressings off, cleaning all the wounds, applying the medication, and putting the new dressings on because they were compression dressings. So this is a long, long process. So I pull up a chair, actually like a little footstool. That's where I was sitting. And I start the process. And I have a couple questions that I ask people if I want to start a conversation, because we're not going to sit here for 40 minutes in silence. That's just not right. So I will ask people like, what's the most exciting place you've ever been? Or what did you, if you could have been anything in your life, what would you have wanted to be? Right? I like that question too, because we ask kids that, and kids don't have a clue. But if you ask an older person that, it's amazing the answers you'll come up with because they know enough to have an opinion now. I think we're asking the wrong age group, right? So I have questions that I ask. Well, I asked this lady, one of my favorite questions, what's the most exciting place you've ever been? So I think she's going to tell me about a trip that she took or something that she saw or, whatever. And she says, oh, honey, I've never been anywhere. Now, this woman was in her mid to late 90s, by the way. Still independent, still very sharp. Lived in her own apartment, but she was in an assisted living facility for meals and housekeeping, laundry, and just a little bit of help, right? So I'm like, oh, you had to have gone somewhere. I mean, you're in your 90s, had to have gone somewhere. She's like, no, I've never left the county. What? Citrus County? This place? You've never left Citrus County. She says, well, that's not entirely true. I was born in Brooksville, but I don't remember that. Oh my goodness. So now I'm settling in because this is living history. Living. This isn't something I'm reading about in a book. This isn't something that's not relevant. This is living history. This woman has lived in this place for 96 years. Imagine the changes that she saw. So we had a conversation. I ended up staying for 2 hours. 40-minute dressing change. 2-hour conversation. Because this woman did not think she had anything to offer. But man, I learned a lot about the county that I lived in. So don't be afraid to dig a little bit deeper. You can find out all kinds of really cool stuff. You guys want to know how to survive in a recession? Go find an older person. They lived through the Depression. They have all kinds of tips. Things that you
hoard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Have a conversation. You also need to sit. Do not stand over somebody and try to shovel food in their mouths. It makes them feel dependent, inferior. They won't eat. They feel like you've got something more important to be doing. They won't eat. So don't stand. You need to sit. It's the only skill that requires us to pull up a chair and sit, so take advantage of it. All right, so a couple of other differences. We're going to offer the patient a hand wipe before we feed them. And yeah, we're the ones feeding them, I get it. But if food starts to fall out of their mouth, they may put their hand up there to push food in their mouth. You don't want them to do that with dirty hands, right? It's also part of ritual. Like most people wash their hands before they eat. It's part of the eating ritual. So give them a hand wipe. We're also going to offer a clothing protector. They don't have to use it. They don't have to take it. We do not call it a bib. Ever. We call it a clothing protector. Now me, I need a clothing protector for everything that I eat because I wear everything. As my husband will tell you. So if you offer me a clothing protector, I'm going to say, yeah, I'll take that. Now my grandmother, prim and proper, you offer her a clothing protector, she'll probably throw you across the room because I am not a child. I know how to eat, thank you very much. So we offer, we don't insist. Good? We're going to offer a drink before and every 2 or 3 bites. Now this is why your patient is only taking 4 bites because we're trying to see if you're going to offer a drink in that time. Okay, so before and every 2 or 3 bites. Now everybody has different eating preferences. Everybody. Nobody eats exactly like you do. We don't stop and think about this though. We really don't. But some people like, oh, sorry guys. I knew I was missing something. Sorry guys at home. Okay, some people like to drink before a meal. My aunt was like that. She would drink an entire 8-ounce glass of water before she ate. Because in her mind, the water filled her up and it caused her to eat less. And that's how she maintained a trim figure. It doesn't work for me. I tried it. Doesn't work. Some people like to drink after a meal. They want to save their room for the good stuff, right? They drink after a meal. Some people have to drink throughout the meal, particularly if they don't have a lot of saliva, to help the food go down. So you don't know what your patient's preferences are. So we're going to offer a drink before. We're going to offer a drink every 2 or 3 bites, and we're going to offer a drink at the end because we don't know what our patient preferences are. Good? Same thing with eating. How many of you guys eat all of one thing on your plate before you go to the next? Okay. How many of you guys don't like your foods to touch? Okay. How many of you like your corn and mashed potatoes mixed?
Well, sometimes.
Okay. How many of you think that that's disgusting? Yep. Yep. So we have to understand that the way you eat is not the way everybody else eats. Yeah. If you've got somebody who doesn't like their foods mixed and you just mix it all together, they're not going to eat. They are absolutely not. And I'll tell you a story about this. When I was a hospice nurse, I was assigned to a long-term care center, a nursing home, and my hospice patient was in the nursing home. Didn't know if we had a comment. Hospice patient was in the nursing home. She was a stroke patient, completely nonverbal, could not talk, but still with it. Okay, so she did a lot of communication with facial expressions. And she had cancer. She was terminal, end-stage cancer. So she had a lot of things going on. Well, she had to be fed because she had right-sided paralysis. So I go in to see her one day. She's in the dining room. There's a CNA at the table, and she had all of her food was pureed because she had some swallowing difficulties after the stroke, right? So she's sitting at the table in her wheelchair. CNA sitting there. There's a plate of food in front of her, and the plate is this big gray glop. So I go up to her and I'm like, "Hey, Mary, how you doing today?" And she kind of rolled her eyes. And I said, "Oh, it's lunchtime. What are we having?" And I looked at the plate. I'm like, "What is that?" And she just kind of turned her head. Like I said, she communicated a lot in facial expressions. She made this face and kind of turned her head like, "I don't want it." Right? So I asked the CNA, I'm like, "What's for lunch today?" She says, "Oh, we're having Salisbury steak, mashed potatoes, and beets." I said, "Okay, but what is that?" She said, "Salisbury steak, mashed potatoes, and beets." I'm like, "You mixed all that?" And she says, "Well, yeah." She doesn't taste it. Yes, she does. She says, no, puree doesn't have any taste. I said, no, that's bland. Bland doesn't have any taste. Puree, full flavor. Full flavor. Would you eat Salisbury steak and beets mix?
No.
She goes, "No, that's gross. Go get her another tray. She's not going to eat this." Right? So we have to be careful about our own misconceptions here. Pureed does not mean bland. Pureed is still full flavor. We just chopped it up. It's a different texture, not a different flavor. And don't mix beets with anything unless your patient specifically tells you to, because that's just gross. Okay, good. Questions? All right. So we need to make sure that we understand all of these things about feeding. So there's a lot that goes into this, right? It's not as simple as just open up and shoving food in. There's a lot of rules here to follow. Now, comment. All right, Kevin. "Hi, Miss Patty. I like how you relate your experiences with the patients to your students. It helps bring learning to life." Oh, thank you, Kevin. Thank you. I appreciate that. I like bringing comments or scenarios in. I think it makes it a little bit more real to you. But here's the problem with eating. Okay, there's a lot of rules that go along with it. But those rules are there for a reason. Now, the problem with eating is that eating is the very first skill you become independent at. You learn how to hold your bottle long before you sit, stand, crawl, or walk. You learn how to pick things up off a high chair tray and get them to your mouth before you even understand what hungry is. You learn to feed yourself before you master anything else. So when you lose the ability to feed yourself, it affects you psychologically in a way that no other skill can. Patients that are fed do not eat well because of this. They feel very dependent, and very easily we can make them feel like an inconvenience if we don't do this right. Do you think a patient's going to eat well if they feel like they're an inconvenience? So you can have patients with all kinds of conditions that still maintain the will to live. They'll fight. They'll get better. But patients that have to be fed are the highest rate of failure to thrive. They will literally give up. So the way that we approach this skill is more important than any other skill we do. And that's why I save it toward the end, because we need to understand all of those other things in order to understand how to do this skill. Good? Make sense? Now, overall, it's a quick skill. If you look at the bottom of the page, you'll see that somebody with your level of experience should be able to feed somebody 4 bites of pudding in 9 minutes. Yep.
When we're doing this for the test, and say I'm trying to start a conversation with someone and they're eating,
Mm-hmm.
do I, like, if I give them a bite and then I, start a conversation, it's like, isn't it kind of uncomfortable to start a conversation while someone's eating?
No, it's just like at home.
Mhm.
Okay, so do you have anybody at home that you eat with? Okay, so when you're eating with people at home, you probably have conversations.
Right.
So we're going to talk while they're chewing. And then we're going to pause to give them time to answer. And then when they've answered, we'll offer another bite.
Okay.
But during that bite, while they're chewing, our responsibility is going to be to talk, carry our end of the conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it for the test's sake. Like, it's probably going to be a little bit awkward or uncomfortable.
It is. Yeah, for the test, it is a little bit awkward. You don't know your patients. So
Yeah.
I end up, I'm going to show you the video here in a minute. You can tell it's a little bit awkward in this skill because I don't know my patient. Well, I mean, I do. He's my son. But, for the scenario, I don't really know him.
Right.
So I say something like they're going to show a movie on the big screen. Are you interested in going? But I probably would ask a follow-up question to that. What's your favorite movie?
Mhm.
And they're going to answer. And I'm probably going to say, oh, I've never seen that one.
Yeah.
Because chances are I probably haven't seen that movie. But then I'm probably going to talk about my favorite movie, right? While they're eating. So, oh yeah, I've never seen that. But my favorite movie is fill in the blank, whatever your favorite movie is. And then you can tell them a little bit about that movie. Okay. So you want to hold up your end of the conversation while they're chewing. But it's short. We're only feeding them 4 bites. Right. So it's short.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is a little awkward for the test. They're not grading you on how great your conversation skills are. They're grading you on the fact that you tried to have one.
Right.
You tried to have one. Okay. Remember that the person you're feeding is another testing student. So they either just tested or they're getting ready to test. So what do you think their anxiety level is going to be? Pretty high. Yeah, you're going to be lucky to get 1-word answers out of them because they're stressed, seriously stressed over what is going on in their life.
For documentation, how would you document?
We're going to get there.
Oh, okay.
Yep, we've got a whole lesson on that. Okay, so everybody understand the rules that govern feeding? All right, so go to page 74 in your book for a second. Page 74. So for this skill, we are going to have to document on a food and fluid intake form. Now, we saw that a few minutes ago on page 121. But the food and fluid intake form is going to ask us to document based on percentages. So how much of this meal did our patient eat? Pretty simple. If they ate all of it, they ate 100%. If they ate none of it, they ate 0%. Now, what's in between is a little bit trickier. We use what we call a quarter scale to document food intake. So 25%, they picked at it. 50%, they ate roughly half. 75%, they ate most of it, but they left a little. 100% is everything. Got it? Okay, so this is a quarter scale. But in order to do that, you need to know what we started with. So let me explain this. If we're feeding somebody a cup of pudding and they ate all of the cup of pudding, they ate 100%, right? If we're feeding them a cup of pudding, they ate a cup of pudding, 100%. But what if I told you they ate a cup of pudding, but that wasn't everything on the tray? They actually had a steak, broccoli, potatoes, and pudding. And they ate the whole cup of pudding, but nothing else. Did they still eat 100%? No, they only ate roughly 25, right? 1 thing out of 4. Does that make sense? So in order to understand food percentages, you have to know what we started with. Good? All right. So if you look at this graphic, this is what's on page 74 of your book. If you look at this graphic, you can see that we started with, actually, you don't have this one in your book. This is a new one. We started with a whole sandwich, some broccoli, and some Jell-O cubes. That was our lunch. And you go to pick up the tray and you see this. How much of that did this patient eat? Yeah, they picked at it, a quarter of it. It's not half gone. If you look at this one, you'll see that they ate about half of the sandwich, about half of the broccoli, and not quite half of this, but we're going to give them credit for it. So this would be about 50%. Because remember, it's a quarter scale. I'm not going to call that 47%, right? I'm going to use a quarter scale. This, almost everything is gone. Not everything, but almost everything is gone. So what would we call that? Yeah, and this, remember, we quarter scale, so 100%. Yeah. Couple Jell-O cubes, doesn't really count. Good? Make sense? Quarter scale is what we're looking at here. For the test, we're also going to use that quarter scale for the liquids that we're giving our patient, for the water. They're going to have a cup of water. We're going to offer a drink before every 2 to 3 bites and at the end, right? Before every 2 or 3 bites and at the end. So your patient might refuse all of it. They may say, no, I don't want to drink. No, I'm good. No, don't want any water. That's fine. How much water did they consume? None. If they took one sip at the beginning and didn't touch it again afterwards, they probably drank about 25% of the water. If they drank half the cup, they drank 50%. If they're really nervous because they're getting ready to test and they drain that cup dry because they got a dry mouth because they're nervous, how much did they eat or drink? 100%. So for the test, we're going to document our fluids the same way. But that's not how we generally document fluids. In most settings, we're not going to use that quarter scale. We will for the test. But in most settings, we're not going to use that quarter scale. We're going to use hard measurements because our patients are usually on intake and output measurements. This is called I's and O's. I's and O's. So if your patient is on intake and output, we have to actually measure the amount of fluids that our patient takes in. Now, usually CNAs are responsible for logging all oral fluids, anything that goes in by mouth. But that's not the only way that stuff can go in the body. We can put stuff in through IV. We can put stuff in through tube feeding. We can put stuff in through wound irrigation. We got lots of ways to put fluids into the body. So if we're going to document, we want to make sure that we're telling the type of input, oral fluids, by mouth. Make sense? So when you go to work, they are going to, during your orientation, they are going to tell you their cups, how many ounces those cups hold. So in this place, our coffee cups are 6 ounces of coffee. Our water glasses are 8 ounces of water. They're going to tell you how many ounces. Now, it's our job to do the conversion. 1 ounce is worth 30 cc's. 1 ounce is worth 30 cc's. So if we have an 8-ounce glass of water, we would multiply 8 by 30 and get 240. So an 8-ounce cup of water is 240 cc's. A 6-ounce cup of coffee, 6 times 3 is 180, or 6 times 30, 180. So a 6-ounce cup of coffee is 180 cc's. So in order to do the conversion from ounces to cc's, we're going to multiply the number of ounces by 30. Good? You will have a math question on the state exam. It will either be a conversion question like this. You have 8 ounces of water. How many cc's is that? Or it's going to be an addition question. So if you look at this page, page 74 along the bottom, you'll see 6 ounces of juice. So 6 times 30 is 180. So 6 ounces of juice is 180 cc's. If you look at the milk carton, the carton itself tells you how many cc's there are. mLs and cc's are the exact same thing. So sometimes they'll be called mLs, sometimes they'll be called cc's. But all of your pre-packaged liquids always have the mLs right on them. So if you look at that container right there, look where we see the ounces at the very front. How many ounces is it? 14. Next to it, does it have mLs? How many? Okay, so 414. If she drank that entire container, we would give her credit for 414. So prepackaged liquids, they tell us. We just look on the package. And then 12 ounces of coffee, if we multiply by 12 by 30, what do we get? 360. So at the end of the shift, you're going to add up all of the intake for that patient for that shift. So it's addition. So if we add together 180, 240, and 360, what do we get? 780. So our total intake for the day was 780. Now, hopefully, that's going to equal what came out of the patient. That's the whole reason for intake and output, because this should be roughly equal. What you take in must come out, right? So roughly equal. It's not going to be exact because our body does use a little bit of the fluid, but it's got to be roughly equal. But if our patient took in 780 cc's this shift, but they only peed 100 cc's, we have 680 cc's of fluid that are still floating around that body somewhere. We probably want to find out where it is, because that can cause complications. Does that make sense? If it's inside the arteries, we have high blood pressure. If it's inside the lungs, we're going to have trouble breathing. If it's trapped in the legs because we didn't use foot pedals, we got some swelling going on. Where is that fluid? It's got to go somewhere. Well, that would tell me that there's a fluid balance problem. So CNAs are generally responsible for logging all oral fluids. Nurses will take care of all the other fluids. And any toileting that the patient did. Okay, that's what we're going to log as intake and output. And hopefully they're roughly equal. When you're logging, if they aren't equal, who do you think you should tell? The nurse, yeah. Hey, I'm logging intake and output readings. This guy took 2,000 in and only gave me 200. And then watch the nurse run. Because chances are that fluid's in their lungs. Chances are it's in the lungs. So let's talk a little bit about medical abbreviations, and then I'll show you this skill. So this is on page 62 of your skills book. And this goes along with feeding. So I've given you a whole bunch of medical abbreviations here, and you probably need to know most of the ones in the first column. Most of the ones in the first column. This is going to take some flashcards for you. But it's important to understand that most of these are not abbreviated English. They're not going to make a bit of sense to you in English. So let's go up here real quick and talk about a few of these. This first one, PRN, means as needed. Now, there's no American words, English words, that start with P and R and N that would get you as needed. Nothing you could string together there to make that work. And that's because PRN is not abbreviated English. It's abbreviated Latin. So we need to understand that Latin is the language of science. And in order to understand why, we have to go back, about 900, 800 years. Long time ago. So 900 years ago, when science was still in its infancy, there were people all over the world that were making scientific discoveries. Most of these people went to university somewhere, and at university, they learned Latin. It was the one language that was taught in every university all over the world. It was a unified language. So if we had a doctor in Germany, and we had a doctor in France, and we had a doctor in England, And the German doctor made a discovery and wanted to tell all the other doctors about what they found. They couldn't write in German because the person in France and the person in England wouldn't be able to read it. They all wrote in Latin, the one language that was common among all scientists. Does that make sense? So that's where our medical abbreviations are coming from, is Latin. So don't try to make sense of them in English. It's not going to work. Now, since then, in modern times, we created a few additional medical abbreviations, and we did those in English because, yeah, America. Okay, good? Makes sense? So PRN means as needed. Stat means now, right away, don't delay, hurry. And most of us are familiar with that because, Grey's Anatomy. Right? But then we get down to BID, TID, and QID, what I call the IDs. And these are abbreviated Latin. So the way that you remember this is B in Latin stands for bi. A bicycle has how many wheels? Two. B or bi means two. T stands for tri. How many wheels does a tricycle have? So tri means three. Triangle has three corners. By the way, guys, that word triangle, we think it's American. It's not. It's Latin. You guys know that? Tri, three, angle, corner. Three corners. A triangle literally means three corners. Pretty cool. Now, QID is kind of the outlier here. Yeah, Q stands for quad. Quad means 4. QID is 4 times a day. We actually don't use that one anymore. Don't use it anymore. And I actually took it out of the new book. And the reason for that is because in every other medical abbreviation, every single other one, Q does not stand for 4. Q stands for every. Okay. Every. So you can draw a line through that QID. We aren't going to use that anymore. If Q stands for every, QH is every hour. What do you think Q2H might be?
Every 2 hours.
Q3H.
Every 3 hours.
Yeah, and so on. Good? And then we get down to the really confusing one, QHS. Again, abbreviated Latin. Don't try to make this make sense in English. QHS is every hour of sleep, or what we call bedtime. Bedtime. It'd make more sense QBT, right? But it's QHS. I don't even know if I've got that one on there for you. No, I need to put that one on there. Caitlin, send me a message, please, to remind me to put QHS on medical abbreviations. All right, QAM is every morning, QPM is every night, QD is every day, QOD is every other day, and so on. You guys get the gist of this here? All right. Come down here. You can go through the rest of these and learn them on your own. Some are abbreviated English, most are abbreviated Latin. But come down here about 3/4 of the way down, you're going to see NPO. NPO, again, abbreviated Latin. Don't try to make sense of it in English. Means nothing by mouth. NPO, nothing by mouth. So let me tell you a story about this one. Buckle up for this one. So one of our local teaching hospitals, a little south of us, I have the scrub shop, and we have people from all over the place that come in to shop with us because I give you a really good discount because I'm a nurse and I understand how hard you work, right? So we have people from all over that shop with us, and we had a nurse that came in. I became friendly with her. She worked at a cardiac cath lab, and she went up in the morning to get a patient for a cardiac cath. And patients are NPO, which means nothing by mouth before that procedure. Because we don't want you throwing up when we've got a sensitive catheter in your heart. Not a good time to get nauseous, right? We don't want anything on board. Don't want you to aspirate. So she goes into the patient's room. It's not even 5 o'clock, like 4:45 or something, goes up to the patient's room to get the patient, bring him down for the procedure. Patient is sitting up in bed with a food tray in front of him, munching. She freaks out. Whoa, hold up. Why are you eating? you're about to have a procedure. And he says, I know it was weird, but the nurse came in and said I had to eat this before I went down. She's like, what? Hold on, let me go get your nurse. So we're going to call the cath lab nurse, Kathy. Okay. So Kathy goes and finds this patient's nurse, the one that's taking care of him on the floor, and goes to the nurse and says, hey, why is this patient eating? And she's like, I don't know. He's scheduled for a cath today. And Kathy's like, yes, I know. I'm going to pick him up. He's got a tray in front of him. What is going on? She's like, I don't know, but he's got a student nurse. Let me go find the student nurse, find out what happened. So I go find the student nurse, and this is the conversation as it was relayed to me. Okay, so keep track of both parts. Kathy says to the student nurse, this patient is about to have a cardiac cath. Why is he eating? Student nurse says, the order said NPO. Kathy says, I know the order said NPO. Why is he eating? Student nurse says, because he's NPO. Kathy says, what do you think NPO means? Student nurse says, nanas, pineapples, and oranges. This is not a joke, people. It's not a joke. This is real. So first of all, let's address the fact that nanas is not even a word. Okay, not even a word. So this student nurse had no idea what NPO meant, tried to make sense of it in English, rationalized that a fruit tray might be a good idea for somebody going for a heart something, and went and had dietary make up this fruit tray for the patient. Now, understand the consequences here. We've got a patient with a cardiac issue that needs a catheterization to relieve a blockage. Any delay in that could cause him to die. This is serious. And we can't do the cardiac cath now because he's full of nanas. Okay? You've also got a cardiac specialist, a doctor, waiting with nothing to do and no money to make. Does that make them happy?
No.
No. So this is just a huge calamity of errors. So here's the deal, guys. I don't expect you to memorize everything on this list, but I do expect you to have enough integrity that if you don't know what something means, you speak up and ask. At the very least, ask Uncle Google. He rides around in the pocket with you, right? You got access to Uncle Google everywhere you go, at the very least. But I certainly would definitely be asking somebody, what does this mean? Because I don't want to get it wrong. Nanas is not a word. Nanas, pineapples, and oranges is not a diet. Why this student nurse made this up, I have no idea. But there were consequences to this. Okay. Can you imagine going in and trying to explain all that to the patient? You can't have your cardiac cath today. I mean, that I wouldn't want to have that conversation. Not me. So understand that we don't guess ever. You're not going to know everything. When you leave this class, you are not going to know everything. I'm good, but I'm not that good. You will have to learn things as you go through your career. Never fake it till you make it. These are humans. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Good. I have a whole activity on page 63 and 64, or I'm sorry, 62 and 63 that you can do to kind of get familiar with how to use medical abbreviations. We do use them a lot in medicine. It's that kind of a shorthand, especially when we're taking notes on patients. So let's go to page 76 real quick, and let me explain to you how this works. 76. I don't have this one up there. Okay. So when you go to work, wherever you go to work, and you come on shift, the person that's going off shift is going to give you a report about your patients. This is how we pass information from one person to another. And this is usually, generally, where you're going to use medical abbreviations the most. Okay, this is how we pass on care plan information usually. And the way that you do report is going to vary depending on your institution. If you are in a nursing home where your patients never change, I mean, Henry's been here for 15 years now. He's not changing a whole lot. Your report sheet may be printed like what you see at the bottom of page 76, right? We just hand it to you. It's printed. Your patients are always the same. They never change. They're pretty static. This does not work in a hospital. In a hospital, you can have a patient come in and go out on the same day. So we don't use printed sheets. You're going to have to get good at writing this information. And the way that you take report is it's going to matter, because if you miss something, you're not going to have the information you need to help your patients. So you've got to have a very detailed and easy, consistent way of getting information about your patients where you don't miss anything. And that's what the team's report is, because there's 5 things we need to know as CNAs. 5 things we need to know about every single patient that we care for. The first is toileting, because you guarantee they're going to hit that call light during report and have to go. Okay. So you have to know how to toilet your patients. It's always first on the list because everybody has to go every shift. So toileting, I mean, are we taking them to the bathroom? Do they go on their own? Are they using a bedside commode with or without assist? Are they using a bedpan? Do they have a catheter? Are they incontinent? How are they getting their toileting taken care of? Second thing I want to know is eating, because everybody eats every shift, right? So I need to know a little bit about it. What kind of diet are they on? Chapter 8 is going to tell you more about that in your homework this weekend. What kind of diet are they on? Do their fluids need to be thickened? Are they on fluid restriction? You know, is their appetite good or bad? What do I need to know about their diet? A is for ADLs. It's everything else. Bathing, dressing, grooming. You know, it's all kind of like, you know, basic body maintenance type stuff, right? Things that are important, but not as important as toileting and eating. And then you've got M for mobility. Now, mobility is its own special category. Mobility is going to cover, does the patient get out of bed? If so, do they get into a chair and a wheelchair? Do they walk? Do they have walking orders? Meaning, do I have to walk them around the nurse's station so many times so they can go home? Right? What kind of mobility? Do I have to do range of motion? If they're in bed, do I need to turn and reposition every 2 hours? What kind of mobility issues am I dealing with here? So M is for mobility. It's a separate category. And then S is for special, and anything that's not covered anywhere else. Vital signs every 2 hours because they fell. Going out for an appointment later today. Family coming in to visit to make sure they have their favorite sweater on. You know, special. If you use that, I don't have it up here, but if you use that Teams method when you take report, toileting, eating, ADLs, mobility, special on every single one of your patients, you can get report done in less than 10 minutes. That means a person that's going off shift is going to nominate you for CNA of the year because they want to go home. They put their 8 or 12 hours in. They don't want to be sitting there for a half hour while you try to remember everything you need on all those patients. Right? They want to go home. Make it easy for them. Teams report. TEAMS. Everything you need to know about your patient. Good? All right. Look at you guys going. All right, so I just went through a whole lot of information. So let's recap this real quick and I'll show you this skill. Patient must be sitting fully upright. We're going to ask them to sit up because our care plan says they're not. So we'll just ask them to sit up. We're going to offer a hand wipe and a clothing protector. They can use them or not, doesn't matter. We're going to sit while we feed them. Remember, it's the only skill that requires that you sit. We're going to offer a drink before in every 2 to 3 bites. We're going to offer small bites. Spoon should be less than half full, and we're going to feed them slowly. We are going to have a conversation while we do this. Doesn't have to be real. We're going to encourage that patient to eat when they stop. Remember, they will stop after 4 bites. Try to encourage them a little bit. And then at the end, we're going to leave their mouth clean. So use clothing protector or a napkin, dab their mouth. And then at the end of the skill, we're going to document, but we can't document right away. We got to do our whole closing. Thank you very much, Ms. Jones. Is there anything else I can get for you? Are you comfortable? Here's your call light. Environment's clean, open curtain. Go wash my hands, and then I can document. Now, for the test, you're only feeding somebody 4 bites. I can guarantee you it's only going to be 25%. That's all you're feeding them, 4 bites. So for food, it'll be 25% for the state exam. For fluids, I don't know what they're going to drink. You're on your own there. Okay. And you'll document on the food and fluid intake form. Once I document, what's the next step I have to do?
Wash my hands.
Wash my hands. That's right. Right. Very good. So after we document, we wash our hands again because we have to end skill with clean hands. Good? Not too bad, right?
I thought you were asking who after you mark it.
All right, guys, give me just a second because, we need break, don't we? Yeah. Go ahead and take your break. Let me get this video loaded. So go ahead and take your break, guys. Come back at 5 after. Get this video loaded up. No, I'm just going to do this Friday, and then I probably won't have one for 2 or 3 weeks.
Would I still be considered us getting to production?
Yeah, probably not. I'm giving you guys a break while you're in class.
Okay.
Let me think about how I'm going to handle that. Okay.
Because I was thinking, you said I could do a payment online. I was thinking, because I can't make it this Friday, doing the payment online now, this Friday.
And then taking the class later. Yeah, let me see if I can work that out. Let's see what I can do. Just gonna go home and put in that thing, but now he's gonna just have John do it. Oh, okay. Look for him. Does he know how to put it in? Yeah. He does? You called an elevator. You gonna buy it? Said he'll go get it and bring it to the house. And I'll have John go and do it. I'm paying for it.
I sent her that link of what happened in Springfield. Did you tell her it was Jenny? Did she know Jenny?
Mm-hmm.
I talked to Mary Ann yesterday. She goes crazy. Yeah, for what? That's all she has. And she got paid for the place. Paid out well. Is she not working anymore? Is she not working anymore? No.
Put her came up in my memory. That was fun. We get kicked out at the end of the street. At that restaurant with the Irish music.
Is that that song?
No.
That's what it's called. Yeah. It's called Mr. Mayor.
It is? No.
I think so.
not looking for it. Yeah, I should just go and see it. Shouldn't do it for later. No, I did. I thought she did 4 hours. That's okay. No, it's nice. Look at me.
That's fine, no worries. You'll probably want to catch the replay.
Yeah.
Because we're getting ready to go for Perineal, which you'll want to
Okay,
tomorrow.
okay.
So catch the replay.
Yeah,
It'll be fine.
thank you.
Here, let me get you your, here's your review sheet.
Okay.
You're welcome. All right. We'll get started in about a minute. Does anybody have any questions before we get started?
When we go into practice time, are you able to help me how to register for the state exam, like through your website though? Because I was looking, like you said under testing, I don't know if it's part of some
Yeah, I'll take a look at it. Remind me when we go for practice and I'll pull it up and see. All right, so let's go ahead and watch this video on feeding. I don't have any food to feed you guys, so I'm going to show you the video for this one. It's not a hard scale. I think the video only takes like 4 minutes. According to the state exam, you've got like 9 to do the scales, so don't rush this. Take your time. You got plenty of time. I'll show you this video, and then we're going to get into Perineal Care. And I am working on sound. Get rid of the echo, but I gotta get louder sound. We are a work in progress.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. Would you like a snack?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm going to go wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. Can I ask you to sit up straight for me, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Jones, let me get you a hand wipe so that you can wipe your hands. Would you like to take that? Thank you very much. Let me
Thank you.
dispose of this. Okay, can I offer you a clothing protector?
Yes, please.
I'll just place this on your chest. Okay, it looks like we have pudding. How does that sound?
Great.
Very good. Can I offer you a drink before we get started?
Please. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
There you go. Do you have any plans for this afternoon?
No, I do not.
They're showing a movie on the big screen in the activity room. Would you like me to get more information on that for you?
Yes, please.
Okay. How does the pudding taste?
Delicious.
Very good. Ready for another?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can I offer you a drink? Would you like something to drink?
Yes, please.
All right. Ready for another bite?
Yes, please.
Ready for another bite?
I'm actually full.
Are you sure you wouldn't like just one more bite?
I'm okay, thank you.
Can I get you something else from the kitchen?
No, thank you.
Okay. Let me know if you get hungry later, and we'll get something to eat. We do have food available on the unit.
Thank you.
Going to take the napkin. There we go. I'll remove this clothing protector from you, and we're going to put this in dirty linen. I'm going to go take care of your tray. I'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to place the tray back on your table. Is there anything else I can get for you? A magazine, perhaps?
No, thank you.
Your call light is within reach. Please let me know if you should need anything. I'm going to go wash my hands and document.
Okay, thank you.
After washing my hands, I'm going to document the amount of food that this patient ate. Using my documentation form, I'll review the steps of my skill, make any corrections, and tell the evaluator my skill is done.
Questions? Quick. Takes me way longer to explain feeding than it does to show you. So does privacy matter while feeding? No, Debbie, because feeding is a social event. Most people gather in groups to eat. You being around other people will stimulate your appetite. So no, we don't close the privacy curtain for feeding. Unless the care plan tells us to. There are some situations where the care plan may have us close the privacy curtain because of patient preference, right? So we'll go by our care plan. But as a routine, we don't close the privacy curtain. All right, so moving on. Let's go to page 110. This is the last skill for today, and then we'll open it up for practice. You should have roughly an hour, maybe a little bit more of practice time built into class today. So do you see how the first 2 weeks I don't give you any practice time because I'm still trying to teach you, and then as we go through the classes, you get a little bit more practice time each time. By the time we get to Monday, you'll probably have about an hour and a half of practice in class on Monday. And then Wednesday's graduation. I got a lot of stuff to tell you for graduation. So you probably won't get as much practice. You still will have some, but you won't get as much practice time on Wednesday just because I've got so much to go over with you. All right, so at the top of the page, page 110, we're going to find our care plan. Our care plan tells us the female patient has been incontinent of urine and needs perineal care. The pad under the resident is wet, but the hospital gown and bedding is dry. Guys, this is a miracle. It never happens this way. When you have an incontinent patient, the gown gets wet, the bed gets wet, everything gets wet. But the test is reducing this down to just peri-care. It's going to be done on a mannequin. The mannequin really didn't wet, so nothing is really wet. We're simulating, but we're showing that we understand how to do the steps, and that's what we're going to be going over now. But in order to understand this, we have to talk about what incontinence is. And this is kind of one of those things that a lot of people think they know what incontinence is, but they actually don't. So I'm going to kind of go over some misconceptions here. This is a washing skill. So that means that washing rules are going to apply. And to remind you of what the washing rules are, we don't put soap in the basin. We use a paper towel to turn the faucet on. We check the water. What should it feel like?
Warm.
Okay, who else checks the water?
The patient.
The patient. We're going to use the leaves method for wet body openings. This is definitely a wet body opening. So we need the leaves method. And if you remember what the leaves method was, we took a washcloth, folded it in fourths, had the top leaves at the top, and then we cleaned something and folded it over. This gave us a new cleaning surface for each stroke. And remember, we have 5 independent cleaning surfaces on that washcloth. You'll see that again for this skill. Whatever we wash, we
Dry.
rinse. Whatever we rinse, we dry. There you go. All right. We're going to change that water if it gets cold or soapy. This is a long skill, guys. If you look at the bottom of the page, you're going to see that it can take up to 17 minutes. Remember, room temperature always wins. Remember we heard that? Room temperature always wins. So that water, although it started out warm, is going to cool down pretty rapidly. So if we get to, 15 minutes on this, we may have to change that water. Pay attention to it. We don't want to get the bed wet. Make sure you're wringing out those washcloths really well. We're going to put a chucks underneath the patient while we're cleaning so that we don't get the bed wet. And lotion does not apply to this skill. Please do not put lotion anywhere near a peri area. That's not what we're there for. That can actually hold in moisture and increase the risk of UTIs. So, let's talk incontinence. So 5th grade anatomy review. 5th grade anatomy review here. We have kidneys, 2 of them. Those kidneys filter blood and remove waste products, and they create urine out of those waste products. This happens 24 hours a day. Your kidneys never, ever, ever take a coffee break. Just like your heart, always working, forever. Right? Pancreas, at least it gets a little time off in between meals. It's got a nicer job. The kidneys, they have to work 24/7. So as your kidneys filter blood 24/7 and produces urine, those urine drops are going to fall down tubes called ureters. And then they collect in a Ziploc bag that we call the bladder. That's all your bladder is. It's a Ziploc bag that holds urine. At the bottom of the bladder is a little valve. Pay attention to this valve. It's a little thing that does a big job. And then we have a tube called the urethra that allows urine to exit the body. So as your kidneys filter blood, produce urine, those urine drips go down ureters into the bladder, your bladder fills. As your bladder fills, and it fills because we've got that little valve down there that keeps it closed, as that bladder fills, eventually it's going to ring a bell in the brain, say, hey, we're full, find a place to empty us, you go find a bathroom. You open that valve and all that urine comes out. Good? 5th grade review. Okay? Everybody understand this? All right. Because when you are incontinent, that system still works. Kidneys still filter blood, produce drips of urine 24 hours a day, never stop. Those urine drips still fall down tubes 24 hours a day, never stops. Those urine drops go into the bladder 24 hours a day, never stops. The problem is our valve doesn't work. So if there's nothing to hold it in the bladder, where is it going to go? Out. That is correct. So incontinent patients, everything still works except for the valve. That's the only thing that's broken here. And the good news is, in many, many, many cases, we can get that valve back in shape. It's kind of like muscles, right? If you don't use it, you lose it. If you got somebody who was a bodybuilder and then they decided to become a couch potato, right? All of those muscles are going to get flabby. They're not going to work as well. They're not going to look as good. They're not going to function the way they used to because they got flabby. But if he hit the gym again, it wouldn't take long to get those muscles back in shape. Well, that's this, right? This valve, over time, gets a little lazy. Doesn't work well. This happens primarily to women, twice as many women as men. Pretty common over the age of 65 because, again, we kind of slow down. Remember that energy, right? We're out of energy. So we don't walk as much. We don't do as much. We're not as active, which means that bladder muscle isn't getting much exercise. It gets flabby. So if we get this patient up into the bathroom every 2 hours around the clock, yes, we're waking them up at 2 a.m. and getting them to the bathroom every 2 hours around the clock. And before meals, we are giving that muscle a workout. And what do you think is going to happen if we start working it out? Yeah, it comes back. Absolutely. This is called a bladder retraining program. It's very common. You're going to see it in a lot of facilities because it's always better for our patients to be continent versus incontinent. Good? Make sense? Okay, so this is the part when you're incontinent that doesn't work. So if we have an incontinent patient, it's important to understand that these patients are going to be wet all the time. Remember, those kidneys are filtering blood 24 hours a day. Those drips are going into the bladder 24 hours a day. Nothing to hold them there, so they come out. So your patient's going to be drip, 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 drip all day long. If you've got a patient that's dry, 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 really, really wet, they are not incontinent. What you have is incompetent staff members who aren't getting that patient to the toilet. But the patient is not incontinent.
So incontinent means that you're unable to hold your pee.
Because of the valve. The valve is broken. Yep, unable to hold your urine. Yep. Good?
How does that happen?
Do we learn about a catheter? Like,
We're going to learn about catheters on Monday.
Okay.
We don't change catheters, not our job, but we do clean them. So we will learn about catheters and how catheters work in the urinary system. I'm actually going to show you catheters.
Okay.
I have some samples so you guys can see what they look like and how they work. So we'll go over that on Monday.
Oh, I was wondering, like, how does the valve, like, get weak?
Over time, just not being used, right? So every time you go to the bathroom, you actually open that valve. When you stop going to the bathroom, you close that valve, right? So over time, when your energy levels are down, you just don't want to go to the bathroom because you don't have enough energy. Do you remember our energy conservation class on Monday? Right, we talked a little bit about that. Yeah, so our energy levels decline over our lifespan, as we get older. You're going to want to go back and watch that lecture because it's kind of a long lecture. So go back and watch last class to review. But this muscle also, over time, can get kind of stretched out. This usually happens with women after childbearing. Because when you hold a baby in there, right, 7-pound baby, maybe more, maybe less, but 7 pounds of pressure, right, it's literally laying on that bladder.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a baby in there and it's pressing down all of that pressure, that valve, let's go back to that valve real quick. That valve, teeny tiny little guy. I mean, teeny tiny little guy, right? It's like, imagine a pencil, right? The thickness of a pencil. The valve is inside there. Teeny tiny little thing. When you have a lot of pressure pushing down on that, over time, it gets kind of stretched out. So this is what we call stress incontinence. When you dribble a little bit, when you cough or laugh or pee or jump or lift something heavy or, that type of thing, right? That's stress incontinence, very, very common among women who have given birth because you've got all that pressure pushing down and the valve got a little bit stretched out when we have baby on board. Now, stress incontinence is very common. It's still incontinence, still a little bit of a dribble, but it's not what we call functional incontinence, right? Patients dry most of the time, except for those situations. Then we have urge incontinence. It's a different type of incontinence. You know how when you're going about your day and you realize, hey, I think I got to pee. I haven't peed in a couple hours. I think I'm getting a little full. Let me go find a bathroom, right? It's not like an emergency. But if you've ever gotten to a point where you put that off for a while and now it's an emergency, I have got to pee, right? You know that feeling? And you can't put it off. Like, I have got to pee right now. Let me get to a bathroom, right? So urge incontinence, you don't get that middle part. You don't get that, hey, I haven't peed in a while. I think I probably should go to the bathroom, right? It just goes straight from I'm fine to, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it, right? So that's urge incontinence, okay? And usually it results in, wetting yourself because that valve just can't control that sudden overwhelming push, right? So that valve just can't deal with that. So there's stress incontinence, very common. Most women that have given birth have some sort of stress incontinence, when they sneeze or laugh or cough or lift something heavy. Urge incontinence usually happens when we're older, because those sensations diminish over time. So we go from I'm fine to, oh my gosh, I got to pee pretty quick. That's usually as we age. And then functional incontinence is something that happens as a result of trauma or illness. So if we have a stroke, maybe our nerves were affected and we can't control that valve anymore. Maybe we had surgery, bladder repair surgery. And when they did that, they cut the nerve. Now we can't control the valve. It could be a lot of different things. Could be multiple sclerosis, could be Parkinson's, could be, it's called functional incontinence because it affects the actual function of the valve. It's not just lazy or sloppy or getting old. It's the actual function that's affected. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So 3 different types of incontinence that we have to worry about. Functional is the one that we're most engaged with as CNAs, okay? That's the one that we're most likely to have to treat, to come across. So, because remember, functional happens because of trauma or illness. Well, what are our patients suffering from? Trauma or illness, right? So just by the very nature of our patients, we're going to see more of this incontinence. Good? Make sense? I just wrote a whole lesson on this for the new book. I got a whole page on the different types of incontinence.
Is there incontinence for the colon or anything?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So, hold on. I don't have my mic on. I keep forgetting. Sorry, guys at home. I hope you could hear me. I've got this microphone, so they are picking up some. All right. So, yes, the question is there bowel incontinence? And the bowel system works very similar to this, right? There's a whole area for the stuff to go through. Those are our intestines. And at the bottom, we have a valve. And over time, that valve can get sloppy. So, yes, can also get sloppy because of trauma or illness. So, yes, there is also what we call bowel incontinence. You can have bladder incontinence and be fine on your bowels. You can have bowel incontinence and be fine on your bladder. Or you can really spin that roulette wheel and come up with 00 and have both. Okay. Good? Questions?
Is there a lesson that teaches how to clean those patients up as well?
So Care that I'm going to teach you, we're going to clean the backside as well. So that process we would use with bowel incontinence. Okay. All right. So if we have a patient who is incontinent, remember they're going to be wet 24 hours a day. Now, this is also positional.
When you have a patient that's laying down, remember gravity, right? Remember gravity? You have a patient that's laying down, their bladder is laying like this, horizontal. That means that as urine flows into the bladder, some of it might kind of pool up in there, right? Because it's laying horizontal. When you turn that patient on their side, everything's going to move, right? So chances are when you turn an incontinent patient over, what are they probably going to do? Yeah, they're going to pee a little bit. Absolutely. And it's all just because of gravity and position. Does that make sense? And let me tell you a story about this. The reason that I go over all of this with you is because of something that happened right here in Florida 7 or 8 years ago. There was a young man who was working in an assisted living facility here in Florida who was caring for an incontinent patient and performing Pericare. When he turned her on her side, she peed a little bit. Well, that's gravity. Positional. Makes sense, right? He beat her to death because he felt she disrespected him. He beat this woman to death because he did not understand how incontinence works. So I tell you these stories for a reason.
Even if it was intentional, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. My question is, how many patients was he abusing before that nobody picked up on?
That's sick. Yeah, how do you not notice the other patients? That's crazy.
This is why I do what I do. This is why I live stream. Because there are people out there that don't have the money to take a class. They're going to challenge the test and hope for the best. And then they're going to get out there in the workforce. And if they don't understand how incontinence works, they're likely to react negatively to their patients. This is why I do what I do. Because I'm trying to keep our patients out there safe from you. Make sense? So if we have a patient who is incontinent and they're going to be wet all the time, drip, 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 we have to understand that adult urine is not like baby urine. It's not. Baby urine, very mild, right? Because what comes out of us is processed from what goes in us, right? As adults, we eat a lot of acid. We drink a lot of acid. Acid is in coffee. It's in sodas. It's in juices. Our food is very acidic. So all of that acid, when we eat it and drink it, has to come out through our urinary system. So our urine is very acidic. Well, babies, they aren't eating and drinking soda or coffee. They've got formula, breast milk, rice cereal, bland, right? Very bland, very neutral. So their urine is very neutral. It doesn't burn the skin. You can put a diaper on a baby, put them to bed, wake up 8 hours later, and they still have skin on their little tushes. Don't do that with an adult. If you hold acid up against the skin for 8 hours, what's going to happen to the skin? Yeah, absolutely. So when we have a patient who is incontinent, we need to clean and change them every 2 hours around the clock. So that means we're waking them up at 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. Make sense? Told you guys I'm in a lot of CNA groups online, right? On Facebook. So this is something that comes up a lot, and I'm going to be doing a weekly lesson on this very shortly. This comes up a lot. So when you get out there in clinical setting, when you start working as a CNA, no matter where you are going to have to do every 2 hour change and checks, right? So you're going to go into your patients, check on them. If they're incontinent, you're going to change them, get them clean and dry every 2 hours around the clock. Well, that's the standard. Makes sense, right? Good. All right. Remember I told you that incontinent patients are always wet. Always wet. You guys remember that, right? Okay. So you've got CNAs out there that are supposed to do every 2 hour change and checks. And they will say, oh, I didn't need to change that incontinent patient because he was dry. But wait a minute, incontinent patients are
Always wet.
always wet. So either they were wet and you didn't change them, or they're not incontinent and you're not getting them to the bathroom. There's a problem there. If you've got patients on every 2-hour clean and change, that means that you either change them or you get them to the bathroom. You can't skip. There's no option C. You either change them or you toilet them. There is no skip option. Does that make sense? Remember that. If your patient is not wet, they're not incontinent. Or if they are incontinent, they're dehydrated, which can happen in a clinical setting, especially in this heat. So we don't get to skip this. Every 2 hours around the clock, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m., 8 a.m., every 2 hours around the clock. Good. Remember I said that we can retrain that valve by getting our patient up to the bathroom every 2 hours around the clock? Well, if you're already getting them up to change them, might as well get them into the toilet. And then we can fix that valve and our patient will have fewer issues. Make sense? All right. So when we have a patient in bed, when we have a patient out of bed, let me start there. When we have a patient out of bed, we usually put an adult brief on them. We don't call them diapers. Remember, nothing baby for an adult. So don't call them diapers. We usually have an adult brief because it's a dignity issue. Nobody wants to wet themselves and wet through their clothes. And it's a dignity issue. And that works well, but we still have to clean and change them every 2 hours around the clock. That doesn't change because the urine's right up against the skin. But here's the problem. We have an absorbent surface that's going to hold urine right up against the skin. That's bad. We also have plastic lining so it doesn't escape, so it doesn't get your clothing wet. That's going to hold in body heat and block out light. So we end up with warm, dark, moist. What grows there? Oh, all the bad stuff. Absolutely. Bacteria, viruses, fungi, mold. Although it shouldn't. Hopefully in 2 hours, if we got mold, we got a bigger problem. But yes, all pathogens, including mold, grow in that environment. So our patients, when we have adult briefs on them, are at risk for infections. Do you guys see that? Warm, dark, moist. If we have a patient that's incontinent, this is appropriate when they're out of bed. Absolutely. Because that's dignity. But if they're in bed, there's a better option. When they're in bed, if we place them on a chucks in the bed with no undergarments on, just chucks, we call it open to air. It draws the urine away from the skin so it's not held right up against the skin, allows light and air to circulate, and we cut down on the amount of infections our patients have. It's called open to air. Not all of your patients will be comfortable not having undergarments on in bed. How would we know which patient we're going to leave open to air and which one we're going to have a depends on? Care plan, absolutely. The nurse solves that problem for us. All we have to do is follow the plan that's laid out. Good? Make sense? Okay, so that's what this patient that we're working with for this skill for the test is doing. They are laying on a pad open to air. The pad is wet, although it's not really wet for the test. We're pretending it's wet. We're going to change the pad that the patient's laying on. Let's think about that pad for a second. What's our body temperature?
98.6.
All right, 98.6. Urine, when it comes out of the body, is even hotter because it's kept right here in our little furnace area, right? So urine, when it comes out of the body, is about 100 degrees. 100 degrees. So that 100-degree urine meets 75-degree air. It's going to cool down really quick because room temperature always wins. So what do you think that pad's going to feel like to the patient? Cold. Cold, wet, and probably a little slimy. Pretty gross. If you were laying on it, what would you want?
It changed.
Yeah. First thing we're going to do is change that pad. First thing out of the gate, change that pad. But now we got a dirty butt on a clean pad. So when we get done cleaning the patient, because remember that bottom has been laying in urine. So when we clean this patient, we're going to clean the front where the urine came from, but we're also going to clean the back that was laying on this wet pad. So once we get the pad or the patient all clean, we're going to change that pad again. So we have clean butt on clean pad for the next 2 hours. Good? Questions?
When would be like the time to take them to the restroom? Things like
If our care plan tells us to, absolutely. Because if we get that valve strengthened, then the patient is less at risk for skin issues and infections and all those other things.
So do you take them after you clean them? Or do you
Depends.
wait till
Yeah, it really depends on what you're working with. If they have feces all over them, yes, you're gonna clean them first and then take them to the toilet. If it's just a little bit of urine, then I would take them to the toilet and clean them while they're there. It depends on what I'm working with. Yeah. All right. So remember that our patients may be open to air. How would we know which is which? Care plan. So in this case, we have a patient laying in bed. She's laying on a pad. Now I want you to pay attention to where that pad is. When we have a pad under the patient, we want it sideways, right? I don't want it long ways. I want it across the bed. So the widest part of the pad should pretty much fit on the surface of the bed. Make sense? Not this way. We also want it to be just above the waist at the top and mid-thigh at the bottom. This is where your pads go. Do not have the pad under the chest. It doesn't do any good. Don't have the pad too low either. It's got to be in this one specific area.
when would the long-term like pads be used, like the washable ones?
Your facility will make that determination.
Oh, okay.
So we have washable bed pads, yes, and we usually just call those bed pads. The disposable ones are called chucks. It depends on your facility. Some facilities use washable bed pads. Other facilities prefer to use chucks. It depends on what your facility requires. It also depends on what's happening with the patient, because sometimes patients provide their own supplies. So somebody's got to pay for it, right? Either the facility or the patient. So we're going to go by our care plan for each patient, but also our facility policy and procedures.
I was hearing about CNAs writing their names on their
Okay, let's talk about that, right? Again, you have to follow your facility policy and procedure. So what you're talking about is when I change a chucks, or a depends on a patient, right? If I write my name and the time that I did that, then any nurse that comes by can see how long that brief has been on the patient, right? So I'll be able to tell if you're skipping your 2 hour. But what keeps her from predating something, right? So if you know that the nurse is going to come behind you and check sometime during this shift, instead of writing 11:30, you might write 12:30. So the problem is that there's nothing scientific. There's nothing, you're not printing something out that, proves the time that you actually changed that, and people lie all the time. So there's nothing that says that that is actually correct. That's problem number one. Okay. Problem number two with it is that there's nothing keeping somebody else from writing on it to try to get you in trouble. You guys are aware that there are bad people in the world, right? Yeah. And sometimes in clinical settings, there are cliques. Have you ever worked in a place that had a clique?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's one everywhere you go.
They're pretty, yeah.
Everywhere.
And unfortunately, and I hate to say this because it sounds horribly sexist, and I'm probably going to get some very bad comments on my YouTube channel for saying this, but healthcare is a predominantly female-driven industry. Okay, so we have a lot of female CNAs, we have a lot of female nurses, we have a lot of females in healthcare in general. And females tend to be a little bit territorial, And they do tend to form alliances and cliques a little bit more than male counterparts. So because of that, unfortunately, you may find yourself in a setting, and yes, I know YouTube, it's not all females. I'm not one of them. I am not a cliquey type of person. I am much happier behind my computer away from people, right? So I get it. But we have to acknowledge the reality of this. And there's nothing that stops somebody, because there's nothing scientific about this, right? There's nothing that stops somebody from trying to get you in trouble by writing on a brief something that you didn't do. So you have to go by I think in general, it's a good idea. As a nurse, I would like to know, when was this brief last changed, right? That's information I would like to have as a nurse. But I also have to understand the negative sides of this as well. And there's nothing scientific about it. So we have to go by our facility policy as to whether they allow, initials and time on briefs. Most facilities don't. They just rely on you to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. They also rely on the nurses to supervise that you're doing the right thing. Okay. Good. So let me talk to you about policies and procedures for a second. So just a few minutes ago over there, while that video was on, I actually just saw a comment that was posted on a Facebook group. And it kind of made me laugh. So this person is complaining that the place that they're working at is requiring paper charting as well as computerized charting. Now, there's got to be a reason. Somewhere along the line, there's a reason that they need that done, right? Computerized charting and paper charting. I don't know what the reason is. I'm not there, have no idea. But there's a reason that they have implemented this system. So the CNA said, I'm not doing it. Well, help isn't help if it doesn't help, right? So it just kind of made me scratch my head. Do CNAs really have, is that their place in the hierarchy, is to decide what they will and will not do in a workplace? No. Who makes the decisions about what you will and will not do in the workplace?
The care plan.
So the nurse, the care plan, administration, right? You are not in any of those areas. So we have to understand our role here. And certainly it would be absolutely appropriate, if that CNA has a problem with this, to go to somebody and ask, hey, I don't get it. Why are we documenting online, electronically, and documenting on the paper? What's the purpose here? Because it seems like a lot of time out of my day. That's perfectly acceptable. And I probably would encourage you to ask, because, sometimes administration isn't aware of everything you have to do. It's appropriate to ask. It's not appropriate to decide. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That one had me scratching my head. Know your role. All right. So you guys know where the pads go? Mm-hmm. Okay, when we just talked about this, remember that pad's going to be cold, wet, and slimy to the patient. We're going to use that leaves method again. Remember, the folded corner goes in the palm of your hand, the leaves at the top, tuck in your two side corners. You're going to use the first leaf to clean something and then fold it over. Second leaf will clean something and then fold it over. Third leaf will clean something and then fold it over. Fourth leaf will also clean something and fold it over. And we're going to use the back side, the fifth area, to clean today as well. So what are we cleaning? Well, here we go. So on a female, and this is going to be done on a female for the state exam, because females have a higher infection risk. We'll talk about that in just 1 second. But on a female, we are going to start at the top of the pubic area and go right down the middle, the inside middle. So this is where your urethra is located, or the area where the urine comes from. It's located at the top of your peri area. So we're going to wipe right down the middle, and then we're going to fold that leaf over. We're going to wipe the outside down one side, fold that leaf over. Outside on the other side, fold that leaf over. The skin fold, the area between the leg and the groin, this crease, we're going to go down that crease, fold the leaf over, and then down that crease as well. So 5 strokes. We never go back up. top to bottom, move away, fold it over. Don't go top to bottom and back up. And that's because of the infection risk here. I don't have it. The infection risk here. Well, let's go back here. Your urethra is only about as long as your pinky. That's it. That is it. So your bladder, outside world. That's it. That's as long. So bacteria, guys, that's a day trip. That is super short. I've got some white blood cells that hang out in this tube. And that way, if bacteria were to enter, those white blood cells can notice that they're an intruder and figure out how to kill them before they ever get into the bladder. And here's the thing about bacteria. Every bacteria in the world is trying to find a bladder to get into. It is the ideal breeding environment for bacteria. It's not only warm, dark, and moist. Sounds good so far, right? There's also an all-you-can-eat buffet and an open bar. Inside your bladder, inside your urine, there are proteins and enzymes that those bacteria need to multiply effectively. And bacteria don't need little boy bacteria and little girl bacteria to make baby bacteria. It doesn't work like that. If a bacteria is in the right conditions and has the right enzymes and proteins, it will zip itself in half and create two. And then those eat and drink. They zip themselves in half, and now we've got 4. And then 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1068. And this happens that quick. So we don't want bacteria in our bladder. Now, thankfully, we got a couple white blood cells that are hanging out in the urethra to help prevent that from happening. And that works fine as long as the bacteria are only trying to come along in onesies and twosies. Our white blood cells can take care of it. But if we bring an entire busload of bacteria from the rectum up to the urethra, those white blood cells are not ever going to be able to handle the influx. They're going to get overrun. And now those bacteria are going to make their way to your bladder and multiply. You see how that could be a problem? So when we wipe, we go from the top to the bottom, pull away, fold it over. That's why we have to use different leaves for each stroke. Good? Questions? All right. Once we get the front clean, whatever we wash, whatever we rinse, we dry. So once we get the front clean, we're going to turn our patient over. After we turn them, where do they need to be? In the bed? In the middle? Right? So we're going to skin them toward us, turn them on their side. We're going to clean the back side, up the center crease. So from the rectum up the center crease. Because, guys, urine is going to follow that channel. Right? We're going to fold that over. We're going to clean one cheek, fold that over, clean the other cheek, fold that over, up the center crease one more time. There's your procedure for cleaning feces. So center crease, fold, cheek, fold, center crease again. If it's really bad, you get a second washcloth. Whatever we wash, whatever rinse, we dry. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to change that pad one more time. We have a clean butt, deserves a clean pad.
How do you wipe a resident, like if they're using the bathroom, like because they're not laying down?
So the easiest way is to have them lean forward and go in from the back and wipe away from the urethra. So front to back. That's the easiest way. Okay. So usually, especially in residential settings, there's hand holds, or they may have a walker, or they have one of those seats that go over the toilet with handles. So they would hold on and lean forward and allow you access to be able to clean.
Is all of this the same thing, the same process if a female is like on her period too?
Okay, so that's a good question. So you're not going to be dealing with periods very often, because the main population that we're dealing with are past menopause, so they really don't have cycles any longer. Now, if you go into pediatrics, this may be an issue. And we're going to handle it on a case-by-case basis. But a lot of times in pediatrics, we actually give them hormones to stop the periods. So and again, that's a case-by-case basis, right? But yes, there are times that you may have to help a younger female with handling, the menstruation process. Again, you're going to go by your care plan for that patient.
And do we get instructions on how to clean a male up?
Okay, so male pericare, if you look in your book on page 111, we'll talk about male pericare. You see at the bottom of the first column where it says, what about male pericare? So with men, they don't have the same infection risk that we do because that urethra, remember for us, it's as long as our pinky. For men, it has to go through the entire penis and part of the internal structures. So male urethra is way longer, which means they have way more bodyguards, way more white blood cells, and the bacteria have to work way harder to get to the bladder. So they don't have the same infection risk that we do. And that's why we have to do this on a female for the test, because females are more common for incontinence and the infection risk is way higher. So that's why we demonstrate this on a female. But male pericare, we still want to reduce the likelihood of pathogens. So we're going to hold the shaft upright, start at the top, go down in a circular motion down the shaft, fold our leaf. We're going to clean the scrotum. And if the male is uncircumcised, we're going to retract that foreskin and clean under the foreskin with a separate leaf. But we always put everything back where we found it. So put the foreskin back before you leave. The whole process should take you less than 10 seconds. If you're there longer than 10 seconds, you're sightseeing. Quit it. Okay? Quick. Hold it up, clean down the shaft, clean the scrotum. That's it. Less than 10 seconds. Guys, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out, right? You've got warmth, you got wet, you got a human hand. Your patient may have a physiological reaction. Don't yell at them. It's not their fault. It's biology, right? They may have a physical reaction, but if you're quick about it, you won't even know. You'll be out of the area, right? You won't even know. But we need to understand that can happen if we're not moving along. Okay. If you're uncomfortable, if the patient starts to get a physiological reaction and you're uncomfortable, just drape a towel over their lap. Say, hey, somebody's calling me in the hallway. I'll be back in a few. And give them time to get it under control. Right. Okay. Good. Questions? Does happen from time to time. All right. So here are our main points for this skill. We want to change that chucks out first. We're going to use the leaves method, changing a leaf for each stroke, and we're always going to clean from front to back. We'll clean down the middle, the outer labia, skin fold, and skin fold before we turn the patient over and clean up the middle on the back side, one cheek, other cheek, up the middle again. Remember, these are different washcloths. So we have a soapy washcloth for the front and a rinsing washcloth for the front. We have a soapy washcloth for the butt and a rinsing washcloth for the butt. You use the same towel. It's fine. And at the end, we're going to change that chucks again. Good? Not too bad, right? Guys, I'm going to tell you that you're not the first person to do pericare on these patients. If a patient is suddenly incontinent, never been incontinent before, suddenly incontinent, is that normal? CNAs do normal, which means this patient's had pericare done by the nurse at some point. And by the time we get on the scene, remember, we're doing this every 2 hours around the clock, this patient probably knows pericare better than you do, in all reality. So when I tell the patient I'm going to do pericare, they probably know what I mean. But if they don't, I can say personal care. I can say private care. I can say I'm going to wash you down below. What we don't want to say is, I'm going to clean your hoo-ha. Okay, we want to keep it professional. Good? Questions? Be professional. Minimize exposure whenever possible. We only want to expose the area that we're actively working on. Okay, so let me show you this skill because it has really good close-ups. Hi, Miss Jones. My name is Patty. I'm your CNA today. How are you? Wonderful. I need to do Care. Is that okay? Okay, let me close your curtain, wash my hands, get my supplies, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to start out with a barrier. This gives me a clean place to place my clean supplies. So I'll place the barrier on the overbed table. And now I'll start gathering my supplies. I'm going to need 2 chucks, 4 washcloths, a privacy blanket, a towel. I'll place these items on the overbed table. I'll need a basin and soap. And I'm going to need a set of gloves. Okay, Miss Jones, let me go fill the basin. I'll use a paper towel to turn the water on. I'll make sure it's warm, not hot, not cold, just warm. Miss Jones, would you like to check the water temperature and make sure it's okay? It's good? Good. I'll place my washcloths in the water. Okay, Miss Jones, I'm going to place this privacy blanket over you. This is going to help keep you warm and protect your privacy while we do this skill. I'm going to spread the blanket out, being careful not to shake it or snap it. And then I'm going to pull your sheet down to about your knees. Now I'll get my chucks ready for use. I'm going to unfold the chucks, hold it up lengthwise, and roll it toward me. And I'll repeat that with the second one. Clean rolls toward me, dirty rolls away. Now I'll get my gloves on. Okay, Miss Jones, in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to scoot toward me, and we're going to roll you onto your left side so I can change the chucks that's under you. I'll place one of the chucks on the bed. Miss Jones, can you scoot toward me, please? Thank you. And roll up on your left side. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to roll the dirty chucks toward the patient. Tuck it under her hip. Unroll the clean one and tuck it under the soiled. Miss Jones, can you roll back onto your back, please? Thank you. And scoot to the middle of the bed. Okay, I'll come around to the other side of the bed now. Miss Jones, can you scoot toward me, please? And roll up on your right side. 1, 2, 3. We'll remove the soiled chucks from the bed and unroll the clean one. This is going to be thrown away. Okay, Miss Jones, we're going to start cleaning now. I'm going to roll your blanket up to about your waist. This is going to expose you. Please let me know if you're uncomfortable in any way. So I'll roll the blanket up, and on the way I'm going to try to get that gown rolled inside the blanket so that exposes only the peri area. I'll cover her upper legs with a towel, and then get my first washcloth. I'm going to wring this out and soak 5 corners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, Miss Jones, I'm going to clean now. I'll use the heel of my hand at the top of her peri area and my index and middle finger to spread her slightly open so I can clean down the inside middle, top to bottom, and then we'll fold that leaf over. We're going to clean the outside labia, top to bottom, down one side, and fold that over. The third leaf will clean the other side of the labia, top to bottom, fold that leaf over. The fourth leaf is going to clean this area between the leg and the groin, this skin fold, top to bottom. We're going to fold that over, and we'll repeat it on this side, top to bottom. Now we'll place the washcloth back on the barrier. The second washcloth, we're going to wring out, and we're going to rinse all of those areas the same way we washed. So we're going to hold her slightly open to clean down the middle, top to bottom. Fold that over. We're going to rinse down one side of the labia, top to bottom. Fold that over. Rinse the other side of the labia, top to bottom. Fold that over. We're going to rinse the skin fold down one side, top to bottom. Fold that over. And the other skin fold, top to bottom. We'll set that aside. Now we're going to dry all of those areas using short, soft strokes or a gentle pat. I'm going to unroll the blanket, which will place her gown back over her legs. Okay, Mrs. Jones, I'm going to scoot you toward me now, and we're going to roll you onto your left side so I can clean your back side. Go ahead and scoot toward me, and we're going to roll you over onto your left side. 1, 2, 3. The evaluator will hold the mannequin in place for you to complete your cleaning of the patient's backside. Okay, I'm going to take the fourth washcloth, wring it out really well, and we're going to soak 4 corners. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to start at the anal opening and go up the center crease, right up the middle, and we'll fold that leaf over. The second leaf will clean one buttocks. We're going to fold that over. The third leaf will clean the other side of the buttocks. We'll fold that leaf over. And the fourth leaf will clean from the anal opening up the center crease one last time. We're going to set that aside. Whatever we wash, we rinse. So I'll wring that out. And I'm going to rinse the same way we washed. So from the anal opening up the center crease, fold that over. One buttocks, fold that over. The other side of the buttocks, fold that over. And once more up the center crease. And then we'll dry all of those areas. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm going to change that pad out from under you so you're on a nice clean pad. We'll roll the soiled chucks toward the patient and tuck it under her hip. Unroll the clean chucks and tuck it under the soiled. Ms. Jones, come on back, please. And scoot to the middle. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Jones, go ahead and scoot toward me. And roll up on your right side. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. We'll remove the soiled chucks from the bed and unroll the clean. Okay. Go ahead and scoot back to the middle, please. This is going to be thrown away. Okay, Ms. Jones, I need to put all of my soiled items away and clean my basin. I'll be back in just a moment to get you situated. These items will go in dirty linen. And the basin is going to be cleaned the same way we clean everything else. We'll dump the water into the sink. Rinse the basin. pick it up with a paper towel and dry the inside. We'll discard that paper towel. We'll dry the outside and discard that paper towel. And then we'll get the soap. I'll use the paper towel to open the drawer and store the basin back inside. These paper towels will now be thrown away. The barrier is going to be disposed of. And now I can remove my gloves. Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm now going to gather the privacy blanket up and pull your sheet back up. So I'll collect the privacy blanket by lifting from the bottom or underside of the blanket. I'm going to pull the sheet up and ball the blanket up into a ball. That way no trailing edges will contaminate other surfaces. Okay, Ms. Jones, let me go put this in dirty linen. Are you comfortable? Is there anything else I can get for you while I'm here, like a magazine? Okay, here's your call light. If you should need anything at all, please let me know. I'm going to go open your curtain and wash my hands. After washing my hands, I'll think about the steps of my skill, make any corrections, and then let the evaluator know my skill is done. All right. Any questions? Any questions on that? No? Care is on the state exam. It does show up on one skill set. There is a chance you may get it. You should be familiar with it. But more importantly, you need to be familiar with it because your patients are going to count on you. I know it's not comfortable for you, but you've got to practice this to make it comfortable. Okay? Good? Any questions? No? All right. So that is it for today. On Monday, remember your homework over the weekend is chapters 8 and 9. On Monday, we're going to go over catheter care, another range of motion, and emptying the drainage bag. Friday, I'll be doing CPR here. Anybody that wants to attend, just come to class on Friday morning at 9. And don't get here too early because I got to work this into my schedule. So I'll only be here about 10 minutes before. Show up at 9 and I can send you a link for payment when you come to class. Okay? Yeah, when you come to class. Let me get you your review sheets for today. Does anybody have any other questions?
Will you post the lives like after you've done live?
They're on our website. I'm sorry, they're on the courses site. So courses.foryourcna.com. It's on the back of your ID badge. Courses.foryourcna.com. They'll be up there in the first lesson. So look at the first lesson, you'll see the replays. But the easiest place to get them is actually on our YouTube channel. If you go onto YouTube, just search for Your CNA. You know our logo, right? It's on the front of your book. Just search For Your CNA, and all my videos are going to show up there. You'll actually see a live, at the top, you'll see live. If you click on that, all of my lives are there.
And is it okay if I return, like, since I'm working with the last class, is it okay if I return the yellow book, like, when I come, like, for one of your study times?
Yes. So I'm going to give you a graduation folder. Here you go. You won't be here to get your folder. So, just bring your book, give it to them at the retail store. They'll have your folder over there. So they won't give you your folder until they get the book, though. I have to hold something hostage to get the books back. Okay? All right. Rest of class is practice. Anybody who needs to leave, you are welcome to do so. It's adult education. I can't hold you here. You are welcome to leave. But if you're not practicing here, please make sure you're practicing somewhere, because you're not going to pass the state exam if you haven't done these skills at least once. And here you have the mannequin to work on. So it does make it a little bit, and all the supplies, so it makes it a little bit easier. You can also, I don't have one in here. I'll have to bring one in for next week. We also have a practice kit that you can buy. Has everything you need to practice at home with: the bath basin, the wash basin, or the emesis basin, the bedpan, the food tray, the graduate container for measuring urine, drainage bag, gate belt. There's a gate belt in there. Emery board, orange sticks, denture brush, toothettes, toothbrush, gloves, chucks. Everything you need comes in a bag. And the page that I gave you on the first day has the sale pricing for that while you're enrolled. After next Thursday, the price goes up for you. I think I'm giving it to you for $45.99 while you're enrolled. If you go onto my website, it's $64.99.
This page?
Yeah, not that one. It was like a letterhead that.
I think I have that.
It was like, thanks for joining the class.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I think it's
So it
somewhere
talks
in
about the
the
flashcards. They're on sale while you're enrolled for $14.99, and the practice. So I give you guys a big discount on stuff, on additional stuff while you're enrolled up until graduation.
Do you recommend us buying all of that? Like all those resources?
Here's the deal. Okay, I'm not a salesman. I'm not. I don't even like really talking about everything that I have for sale, because I don't want you to think I'm a salesman. I'm not. But I created all these things to help you prepare for the test. So you don't need the flashcards. You've got your book, right? And all the flashcards are just a portable version of all of the principles, all the supplies, and the gray boxes. So you've got that in your book, but the book isn't as portable, you know. So the flashcards just make it a little bit more portable and an easy review. The practice kit, it's got everything you need to practice, so you're familiar with the supplies before you go test, but you've got them all here as well. So if you're in here practicing, you don't need a practice kit. So I have these available for you to help you. You don't have to purchase any of them, and I don't want you to feel like I'm one big sales pitch. But if I don't tell it, this is my problem. A couple classes ago, I didn't mention anything. I didn't tell anybody about the flashcards or about the practice kit or anything. And I had a couple of students that actually complained about that. If I had known, I would have gotten them when they were on sale. So I'm like, I don't know which way to go here. You know, either not telling people or telling them and feel like they're, you know. So it's kind of a hard thing for me. I created this stuff because it's there to help you as much as you want to use them. Does that help? Okay. All right, guys. You guys at home on YouTube, thank you so much for joining me. If you got any value out of this, give me a thumbs up, please. That's how YouTube knows that I'm doing a good job. It's your way of grading me. So make sure you give me a thumbs up. We will see you live again on Monday for class 7. I'm not doing my live tomorrow, so keep that in mind. My live will resume next Thursday. I'm on a deadline. Book is almost done. Keep your eyes open. So we will have the new book available in about 2 weeks or so. So super excited about that. All right. So until next time, happy caregiving. Bye.